Chapter 580. It all disappeared. Seeing the appearance of the second ball of light, countless roars of ecstasy suddenly resounded throughout Wind Stream Valley. Immediately, countless people's eyes turned blood red, and even their breathing became hurried. Spiritual energy whistled as figures gathered their strength and turned into streaks of light. They quickly rushed towards the second ball of light. For a moment, the sound of wind breaking resounded throughout the mountains. The second archaic spirit beast had also appeared, and the scene became even more fiery. The competition had officially entered the incandescent stage. Everyone didn't care about their lives as they tried to catch the archaic spirit beast. Their spirit chi created a monstrous wave and a violent wind blew. The sky was filled with figures like locusts. However, regardless of whether it was the first or the second one, they were both exceptionally difficult to catch. Some lucky people only managed to catch it once before they were forced to retreat. Only the stronger ones were able to barely hold on. However, that was all. The resistance of the descendant spiritual beast was too intense. Even Su Yu and the other strong ones were unable to catch it. Time slowly passed in this intense battle. In less than half an hour, everyone felt as if many days had passed. The main reason was that the battle here was too intense. Every minute and every second was a huge crisis. Some unlucky fellows would be seriously injured or even die here. Everyone had no choice but to raise their state of mind to the peak as they were extremely nervous. In this kind of battle, the slightest bit of carelessness could lead to destruction. In this kind of intense battle, everyone's energy consumption was extremely high. Everyone's speed and the fierceness of their attacks had decreased. Of course, the two descendant spiritual beasts that were beaten up by the group had also consumed a lot of energy. They were no longer as fierce as before. Boom! With a loud bang, a sudden oppressive and terrifying wind burst out. A figure quickly streaked across the sky, and finally stopped in front of a ball of light. He slapped down with one hand, and vigorous spiritual energy squeezed in from all directions, tightly surrounding the ball of light. Yi Hong! Many people cried out in surprise. However, when the surrounding strong ones saw that the latter was about to catch a ball of light, they could not help but sneer. This was because they had already seen how demonic this ball of light was. Previously, the 5-2 Heavens stage experts had tried to intercept it. In the end, he was fooled by this ball of light. Although Yi Hong's strength far exceeded theirs, in this place, just relying on brute force was obviously useless. Therefore, some of the experts who had originally wanted to intervene were forced to do so. Instead, he stopped and allowed Yi Hong to grab the ball of light. Clearly, he wanted to see Yi Hong suffer. Sure enough, when Yi Hong grabbed the ball of light, the little monkey inside began to struggle violently, causing the surrounding space to ripple. Yi Hong's body also trembled violently. Clearly, it was extremely strenuous for him. However, just when everyone thought that Yi Hong was about to fail, the latter's trembling body gradually calmed down. Although the little monkey was still struggling fiercely, for some unknown reason, the violent vibrations caused by its resistance made it feel as if one's fist was smashing into cotton. It was obviously a huge tremor, but when the power gradually dissipated, it was weakened by the famous model. When they saw this scene, the other experts were stunned. Soon after, their gazes turned complicated as they looked towards Yi Hong in the air with unfriendly expressions. Whoosh! However, before these people could do anything, a huge torrent of flames whizzed over and turned into a ring of flames. It whistled and burned around Yi Hong, releasing a terrifying temperature. Seeing this, many experts were unwilling to give up. With Qiu Yun's protection, if they fought again, their chances of winning were obviously not high. Moreover, there was still a remnant spirit beast. Before the two remnant spirit beasts belonged to someone else, it was not worth it to fight with them. Therefore, many people's expressions eased a lot and began to focus on the other remnant spirit beast. However, not everyone thought so. Second on the formidable person list, Su Yu third, Su Yi fourth, Zhu Xia fifth, Bo Jian seventh, Jiang Nan eighth, Zhou Ji. The 6 experts in the top 10 of the formidable person list all looked at Yi Hong. No matter what, their verbal alliance was still somewhat effective. Therefore, they immediately targeted Yi Hong and Qiu Yun. Everyone, this is too much. Qiu Yun's beautiful eyes stared coldly at the 6 people surrounding them. Only the capable ones know about the archaic remains. We don't need to talk about such a simple principle. Su Su chuckled and did not waste any more words. Vigorous spiritual energy swept out. At the same time, Su Yu, Bo Jian, and the others did not hold back and attacked one after another. In the face of external enemies, they were still considered united. After the 2 archaic remains appeared, everyone's eyes were burning with passion as they fought over them. However, they did not notice that 2 people had quietly left. These 2 people were naturally Qin Feng and the big flower explosion. Both of them suffered serious injuries. Because he could not show the slightest abnormality in front of everyone and arouse suspicion, he had been holding on. It was only when everyone was attracted by the archaic remains that he found an opportunity to sneak away. Although the fierce battle did not really happen in the end, he had temporarily opened the second door. Therefore, regardless of whether he fought or not, the backlash from the forbidden technique was inevitable. Since both of them were injured, Qin Feng did not dare to stay here for too long. As for the archaic remains, he could only give up on them. However, he did not leave and instead hid in the dark to heal his injuries. In fact, he was a little hopeful that the fight for the archaic remains would not end so quickly. Qin Feng did not know what happened in the battle in Windstream Valley. He only felt that there were extremely terrifying fluctuations erupting from that direction again and again. After that, it fell into silence. He thought that it was over, but after the movement disappeared for half a day, he did not see anyone return. This surprised him. No matter who got the archaic remains, they would definitely return. However, half a day had passed and not a single person was seen. Did something happen? Qin Feng was surprised. Although he did not know what happened, he was sure that something must have happened there. Fortunately, after half a day of healing and the magical effects of the Divine Wood Seal, he had almost recovered. The main thing was that he had temporarily opened the second door. He did not experience a big battle and the injuries he suffered were only from the backlash from the strange door. It was not too serious. As for the big flower explosion, he had recovered more than half. As long as he did not transform, he would not be affected. Chapter 581. Mysterious Ancient Tomb. The entire Windstream Valley was in ruins and covered in blood. Without a doubt, there had been a fierce battle here. But where were the people? Apart from some corpses, there was no one alive. It was too strange. He was on the way back, healing his wounds while paying attention to the situation. Therefore, it was impossible for him to not notice that those people had left. Therefore, there was only one possibility. Those people had all disappeared from the Windstream Valley. Qin Feng felt a chill down his spine. Those were the elites of the entire Sin City. It was too scary for them to disappear so mysteriously. However, at this moment there was a violent tremor. Then, an indescribable wave of energy swept out from the depths of the Windstream Valley like a hurricane. It was so powerful that Qin Feng's expression changed drastically. He stared at the depths of the Windstream Valley in shock. There were rays of light blooming and auspicious qi gushing out. At first glance, it was as if there was a sudden fog, making it difficult to see. Rays of light curled up, mist surged, and chaos surged. Then, a wide stone door slowly appeared. The stone door was in the midst of chaos, surrounded by rays of light and chaotic mist. It was extremely mysterious. On the stone door, there were complex and mysterious light patterns that wriggled, emitting a strange and indescribable aura. This is an ancient tomb? Qin Feng was stunned. He knew a little about the legend of the ancient tomb in the White Treasure Mountain. According to the legend, there was a mysterious ancient tomb hidden in the White Treasure Mountain. There were amazing treasures hidden inside, but the ancient tomb would only appear at a specific time and place. Very few people had seen it. 99% of the people who entered the White Treasure Mountain had never seen it before. Judging from Rinchier Suyu and the rest of Sin City's people's indifferent attitude towards Bai Baoshan's treasure, Qin Feng knew that those rumors were most likely fabricated by people. Therefore, he gave up on the idea of searching for the treasure. He did not expect the mysterious ancient tomb to really exist and to suddenly appear at this time. Ancient tomb, there really is an ancient tomb. The shock on Qin Feng's face slowly faded. Now, he finally understood why those people had disappeared. They must have entered the ancient tomb. The ancient tomb will only appear at a special time. It seems like this is the special time. Qin Feng nodded. Rumble. When the runes on the stone door dimmed, the stone door trembled slightly. Then, it split into two from the middle and the stone door opened. Buzz. As the stone door was opened, an ancient aura gushed out, causing him to enter a momentary trance. It was as if he had heard the sounds of thousands of soldiers and horses fighting. Qin Feng's heart trembled. He quickly bit the tip of his tongue and sobered up. Without hesitation, he pulled exploding flowers and rushed into the stone door. Just as he entered the stone door, everything before him turned blurry. Immediately after, an oppressive feeling came over him. It was as if there was a mysterious power that enveloped this place, causing the spiritual energy flowing in his body to become slightly sluggish. As he felt this oppressive feeling, a grave expression involuntarily flashed across Qin Feng's eyes. He lifted his gaze and saw that there were over a dozen passageways that led deep into the vast hall. There were also many bloodstains on the ground. Qin Feng looked around. There were over a dozen passageways. He didn't know which one to take, so he could only choose one at random. The ancient tomb was very large. The passageways were connected to each other and branched out into many paths. It was dazzling. Qin Feng and Exploding Flowers walked inside for a long time, but they didn't find anything special. However, from the bloodstains and broken limbs along the way, it could be concluded that a lot of treasures must have been found in the ancient tomb, causing various wars to break out. Damn it! Along the way, Qin Feng also saw many destroyed stone rooms. The things inside had been swept away. There was no doubt that the treasures hidden in the ancient tomb had been taken away in advance. This made him quite depressed. What's there to be depressed about? These are just small profits to confuse people. The real good things are still in the depths of the ancient tomb. The demon eye suddenly said. Qin Feng was overjoyed. Looking at the dazzling and complicated passageways, he quickly asked, "Old demon, do you know the way?" He was late for half a day. If he had to slowly search by himself, it would have been too late. I can sense some strange fluctuations. Let's go. The demon eye's response made Qin Feng breathe a sigh of relief. Under its lead, they walked for more than an hour before gradually approaching the depth. When he arrived here, he could see some people coming and going in groups of 2s and 3s. There were individual loose cultivators and groups of several people. When these people saw him, they were all surprised and quickly retreated with fear. Qin Feng didn't pay attention to these people and sped up into the depth. Therefore, they continued to move forward at full speed. After another 10 minutes or so, the seemingly endless tunnel finally became spacious. Loud rumbling noises and clamoring noises also transformed into rolling sound waves that spread over. Qin Feng and the big explosion slowed down a little. Mental energy covered their bodies, and they slowly walked out of the passageway. Outside the passageway was an extremely vast hall that was similar to a square. There were several passageways around the hall that led to this place. At this moment, there were already quite a number of figures in this large hall. At a rough glance, it was likely that there were at least a dozen of them. Moreover, Qin Feng also saw Su Yi, the young master of the insect, the Hua clan and the others among them. Boom boom! However, at this moment, it was clear that they did not have the energy to sense anything else. Hence, they did not notice Qin Feng's arrival. Everyone in the square was using all their strength to unleash numerous powerful attacks that smashed towards the light barrier in the midair of the large hall. The combined attacks of so many people also caused layers of ripples to repeatedly appear on the light barrier. Qin Feng's gaze swept across the light barrier, after which, his gaze focused on the numerous dancing light figures within the light barrier. Through the thin light barrier, he could faintly see that those light figures seemed to be in the form of blades and swords, cauldrons and other similar objects. Heaven artifacts! Looking at these figures, Qin Feng's pupils immediately shrunk. He deeply inhaled a breath of cold air. These figures were actually all heaven artifacts. What a big deal! Qin Feng muttered to himself. 5 heaven artifacts had actually appeared in this place. I really don't know how powerful the owner of this tomb is. Qin Feng couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The fact that 5 heaven artifacts had appeared in this place meant that the owner of this tomb was unimaginably powerful when he was alive. Trying his best to suppress his rapidly beating heart, Qin Feng's gaze swept across the hall. He discovered that almost everyone was staring at the 5 heaven artifacts within the light barrier with a fanatical and greedy expression. They were now working together to break the light barrier and seize the treasures. At that time, in order to seize these heaven artifacts, one could imagine that an extremely fierce battle would erupt here. For the sake of the heaven artifacts, it was worth it to risk one's life. One must know that the heaven artifacts here were different from those of Yi Hong and the others. They were personally refined by the experts of Imperial Mystery Academy. Even if an ordinary person obtained them, they might not be able to use them. In order to control a heaven artifact, one must first obtain its approval. Chapter 582. White Jade Lotus Seat. The reason why they were so afraid of Yi Hong and the others, other than their tyrannical strength, was mainly because they had heaven weapons that could greatly increase their combat power. This was also why Su Yu and Su Yu were not weaker than Yi Hong and Qiu Yun, but if they really fought, they would most likely lose. Because they did not have heaven weapons to support themselves, they were at an absolute disadvantage. If any of them could obtain a heaven weapon, it could be said that they had the capital to compete with Su Yu and Su Yu. Of course, the premise was that the gap between their strength was not too big. So, with so many heaven weapons appearing here, how could these people not go crazy? Their enthusiasm for heaven weapons might not be weaker than the surviving species' spiritual beast. Qin Feng's eyes flashed as he stood at the back of the crowd. Since no one had discovered him, why should he get involved? It was better to wait for the light curtain to break before making his move. When Qin Feng was looking around, he suddenly realized that Yi Hong and the other 2 students from Taishan Academy did not seem to be among these figures. This was the deepest part of the ancient tomb, and all the good treasures were here. Although Yi Hong and the others might not be as thirsty as them, it was impossible for them to ignore it at all. Qin Feng's eyes flashed, and in the next moment, he fiercely focused. Could it be that there are other treasures here? Also, who has the 2 Archean surviving species? This thought suddenly flashed in Qin Feng's mind, causing his expression to change slightly. Indeed, after he returned to Wind Valley, he did not find the 2 Archean surviving species. Now, only Yi Hong and the other 2 were missing. What was going on? Qin Feng did not believe that the 3 of them had snatched the 2 Archean surviving species. No one, no force, would dare to monopolize the 2 Archean surviving species. But if the surviving species' spiritual beasts were not here, where could they be? And where did the 3 of them go? This ancient tomb is a little unusual. While Qin Feng was puzzled, the Demon Eye's voice suddenly sounded. He was stunned and frowned as he asked, "What do you mean?" If I'm not wrong, The main hall of the ancient tomb that you're in now may only be the tip of the iceberg of the entire ancient tomb. It is just the entrance. Upon hearing this, Qin Feng's pupils constricted violently. If there was only one entrance to such a huge tomb, then what was hidden behind the entrance? Those students are not to be trifled with. There should be some powerful existences in that academy. They have special sensing methods, so they might have entered first, Mo Yin said. Qin Feng's eyes turned red as he asked, Old devil, is there a way to get in? The ancient tomb with 5 heaven artifacts and numerous treasures was only the entrance. From this, it could be seen that the things inside were definitely more precious. Since those people had entered first, Qin Feng was naturally anxious. He couldn't allow all the good things to fall into their hands. There's no hurry. The better the item, the harder it is to obtain it. Mo Yin smiled and said, Aren't you tempted by these 5 heaven artifacts? Of course I am. Qin Feng softly muttered to himself. Soon after, he suppressed these feelings. As he stared at the gigantic light barrier, his eyes crazily flickered. Vigorous spiritual energy flowed through his meridians like a flood, ready to be unleashed at any time. Everyone was also ecstatic as they stared at the flashing heaven artifacts in the light barrier, ready to snatch them at any time. White jade lotus seat, Mo Yin said. Qin Feng was taken aback. He looked at the palm-sized connected seat that seemed to be made of white jade at the corner of the light barrier. His brows furrowed slightly. Not only was he unable to see anything different about this item, he could sense that the energy ripples emitted by this item were the weakest among the 5 heaven artifacts. Why did you choose this? It seems to be the worst, right? Qin Feng asked in his heart. But it's the most suitable for you. Mo Yin smiled. Why? Because it's a flight-type heaven artifact. Qin Feng was stunned for a moment before he nodded in understanding. Once one's strength reached the 9th layer heaven stage, one would be able to draw on the energy of heaven and earth. For them, flight was no longer important. At this level, people paid more attention to the improvement of their combat strength, so these masters would definitely choose heaven artifacts with high lethality. They would not pay too much attention to the white jade lotus seat, which was not of much help to them in flight. But Yang Kai was different. Firstly, he had the Thunder Suppression Sword, which was also a heaven artifact with high lethality. Another heaven artifact would just be icing on the cake. Secondly, he had not reached the 9th layer heaven stage yet. Although he could fly, the consumption was not small, making it unsuitable for aerial combat. With a flight-type heaven artifact, he could make up for this shortcoming, which could be described as timely help. Thirdly, the competition for the white jade lotus seat was the least, so his chances of successfully snatching it were very high. Taking all these factors into consideration, this flight-type white jade lotus seat was indeed the best for him. Under the wild and violent attacks of the crowd, the light barrier in the midair also became dim. It appeared to be on the verge of collapse, as though it was about to shatter. Upon seeing this scene, the atmosphere in the large hall suddenly became a little strange. The people who were originally standing close to each other also simultaneously spread apart. Their eyes were filled with caution. Qin Feng had also sensed the strange atmosphere, but was not surprised. Under the temptation of a heaven artifact, this was a very normal thing. The light barrier in the air grew dimmer and dimmer under the repeated bombardment. Everyone's hearts suddenly became nervous at this moment. Some people had even stealthily taken out their weapons. Crack. All of a sudden, a faint shattering sound rang out. In an instant, the hall became absolutely silent. Everyone's eyes were tightly glued to the cracks that were slowly spreading on the light barrier. Crack. Crack. The cracks rapidly expanded in everyone's eyes. In the end, they had covered almost every corner of the light barrier. Bang. A moment later, when the cracks on the light barrier reached its limit, It was finally unable to endure and exploded with a loud bang, turning into countless fragments of light that scattered down from the sky. Asterisk boom. Asterisk at the instant when the light screen exploded, the hall, which had been silent for a moment, erupted with vigorous spiritual energy. Everyone's eyes turned blood-red at this moment. Their figures leaped into the air, greedily grabbing at the few heavenly artifacts that were exposed in the air. Do it! The instant these people made their move, Qin Feng also pushed off the ground with the tip of his foot, his figure leaping into the air. Just as he had expected, the majority of the people could not suppress the greed in their hearts and directly rushed towards the 4 heaven artifacts that had the strongest energy fluctuations and were suitable to be used in battle. In contrast, the number of people fighting for the white jade lotus seat was much lesser. Only 2 heavenly stage practitioners were paying attention to it. Seeing this scene, Qin Feng coldly chuckled in his heart. His figure turned and directly rushed towards the white jade lotus seat that had the least number of people fighting for it. A flying-type heaven artifact was indeed a necessity for him. No matter what, he had to obtain it. At this thought, Qin Feng glanced at the 2 heavenly stage practitioners who were also rushing towards the white jade lotus seat, a cold glint flashing across his eyes. Chapter 583. Zhou Ji's first battle. The 2 figures charged straight towards the white jade lotus that was floating in midair, their eyes blazing with passion. Qin Feng hid in the air and slowly approached the 2. In the next moment, he suddenly burst out. In an instant, he opened the gate of life, activated the primal war body, and used the Dao Yen mode to raise his essence, energy, and spirit to the peak. Then, he punched out heavily. Poochie! Immediately, one of the experts spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down. Obviously, he was seriously injured by Qin Feng's all-out attack. Who's attacking? The other person was shocked. In his panic, he did not sense Qin Feng's existence. However, when he reacted and sensed the special fluctuation, it was too late. A fierce force exploded in his chest and shot out. He returned in the same way he came. After quickly getting rid of the 2 competitors, Qin Feng came to the side of the white jade lotus and tried to grab it. Buzz! However, just as his hand came into contact with the white jade lotus seat, an extremely strong resistance suddenly erupted from the lotus seat, forcefully pushing his hand away. Boom! Seeing that the thing resisted automatically, Qin Feng was shocked. Even the thunder suppression sword was not so exaggerated. You have the key that fell from the mysterious heavenly steel and have been recognized by the treasure room. However, these heaven artifacts have restrictions and will not be so easily subdued. As if he knew what Qin Feng was thinking, the demon eye smiled and said, Boom! Qin Feng was about to continue when an extremely violent spiritual energy fluctuation suddenly surged from behind him. This caused his face to darken. He turned his head and saw another divine stage expert staring at him with an ominous glint in his eyes. Of course, he sensed his existence. Friend, since you're here, why don't you show yourself? The man said. Qin Feng ignored him and rushed towards him. How dare you! Seeing this, the middle-aged man shouted and quickly circulated the spiritual energy in his body. Then, he punched out. The 2 fists collided in midair. The middle-aged man's body trembled and he quickly retreated. Qin Feng's figure was slowly exposed, starting from his outstretched fist. His mind power had been shattered during the exchange. How powerful! The middle-aged man raised his head, and when he saw Qin Feng, his eyes narrowed. To think that it was this monster. He had seen how powerful Qin Feng and the big flower explosion were when they joined forces, and his expression became more and more solemn. However, Qin Feng didn't give him much time to catch his breath. His attacks were like a storm as they enveloped the middle-aged man. After exchanging a few blows, the middle-aged man could not help but feel a sense of fear. Thinking about the green-scaled monster that had yet to appear, he decided to leave. One Qin Feng was already abnormal enough. With the addition of the war beast tyrant, only Su Yu, Su Yi, and the others could deal with him. With regards to his departure, Qin Feng did not form a pack of wolves. He swiftly turned his head, and was just about to make a move to snatch the white jade lotus seat when he suddenly discovered that a suction force had erupted from a short distance away. Moreover, the suction force had enveloped the white jade lotus seat. Another person had joined the ranks of snatching the white jade lotus seat. Qin Feng's eyes slightly sunk when he saw this scene. He turned his gaze and his expression changed. This was because the person who had attacked was the 8th on the ambitious person list, Zhou Hen, who had a grudge with him. While Qin Feng's expression was changing, Zhou Ji, who was not far away, glanced at him indifferently. The threat in his eyes was extremely strong. It was obvious that he was warning him not to make a move. "He's still trying to take advantage of me," Qin Feng angrily cursed in his heart. He didn't want to have any grudges with Zhou Ji. He had ignored Zhou Ji's attitude many times. He didn't expect Zhou Ji to not know how to restrain himself and become even more arrogant. Qin Feng's expression was gloomy. He coldly snorted in his heart. He casually waved his hand and released a wave of spiritual energy. It directly blocked Zhou Ji's suction force. Then, his figure flashed and once again swept towards the white jade lotus seat. "Brat, you've got guts. Do you really think that your performance outside can make me, Zhou Ji, afraid of you?" Seeing that Qin Feng had actually made a move, Zhou Ji's expression became gloomy in an instant. A fierce light flashed in his eyes. Fierce spiritual energy quickly condensed in front of him and turned into a fierce palm print. It fiercely blasted towards Qin Feng's back. However, facing Zhou Ji's attack, Qin Feng did not show any signs of turning back. He quickly put on the heavenly armor and at the same time, pulled out the thunder suppression sword and swept it behind him. Bang! A bolt of lightning struck Zhou Ji's palm print. After a moment of stalemate, the lightning dissipated and the remaining force of the palm print blasted onto Qin Feng's back. A sharp pain came from his back, causing Qin Feng's body to stagger. However, it was this force that allowed him to speed up and arrive in front of the white jade lotus seat. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and finally grabbed the white jade lotus seat in his hand. Buzz! When Qin Feng grabbed it, the white jade lotus seat struggled again. However, this time Qin Feng was prepared. Spiritual energy gathered in his palm and wrapped around the white jade lotus seat. His hand also tightly held onto it. Qin Feng would not let go even if he was beaten to death. However, the white jade lotus seat's struggle became more and more intense and crazy. It actually caused his arm to become numb. Damn it! Seeing this situation, Qin Feng's face turned ashen. He had spent so much effort and even endured Zhou Ji's attack. If he were to lose to this guy, wouldn't that be too funny? Just as Qin Feng was bitterly holding on, the demon eye's voice suddenly sounded. "Sealed by time, the spiritual treasure has a spirit and will resist anyone. If you want to suppress it, you must have absolute strength or something of a higher level." Hearing this, Qin Feng was stunned. Then, he frowned and his eyes flashed. "This kind of suppression makes it impossible for me to use my full strength. Using strength to suppress it shouldn't work. Something of a higher level?" Qin Feng's expression kept changing. In the end, his eyes suddenly focused and the words, "sky-splitting axe," suddenly appeared in his mind. That's right, the origin of this axe was too mysterious. It was definitely not an ordinary item. Thinking of this, Qin Feng put away the thunder suppression sword and quickly took out the sky-splitting axe. Looking at Qin Feng, who was using his own strength to grab the heaven weapon, Zhou Ji's face became extremely gloomy. His figure suddenly flashed and his spiritual energy madly gathered. He fiercely slapped at Qin Feng. If he was hit, Qin Feng would at least be seriously injured. Although the heavenly armor was a defensive treasure, it did not mean that it could ignore powerful attacks time and time again. Qin Feng also felt Zhou Ji's tyrannical attack. His face was ashen. At this time, he was using all his strength to resist the resistance of the white jade lotus seat. He could not spare any energy to deal with Zhou Ji unless he threw away the white jade lotus seat. Once the heaven weapon is thrown away, it will be even more difficult to snatch it back. However, if I am seriously injured, it is still a problem whether I can leave this place. Chapter 584. Got it, to Heaven Realm? Qin Feng's expression changed when he sensed the sudden attack. Another two Heaven Realm expert was too much of a threat to him. However, he had the white jade lotus throne in his hand and Zhou Ji blocking his escape route. Even if he threw away the heaven artifact, he wouldn't be able to defend himself in time. He couldn't dodge it. However, Qin Feng's expression only lasted for a moment before he recovered. He sensed that the target of the attack wasn't him, but Zhou Ji who was behind him. The tyrannical spiritual energy wind brushed past him and whistled towards Zhou Ji. The latter's expression changed drastically. He crazily urged the spiritual energy in his body to collide with the spiritual energy wind. Boom! As soon as they collided, the two tyrannical attacks exploded like bombs. Zhou Ji didn't expect someone to attack him at such a critical moment. Therefore, he was forced to retreat and heavily hit the stone wall in the distance. He couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. "This isn't an interference, it's a killing blow," Qin Feng said solemnly. He originally thought that Su Yu had helped him, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. Qin Feng suddenly raised his head. It was just as he expected. It wasn't Su Yu, but an unfamiliar young man. The latter was looking at him with a kind smile. Qin Feng was stunned for a moment before he recovered. He had seen this person before. He was an elite from the house of Bai. Brother Bai, you still have the mood to help others. Looks like you don't have much pressure. Do you want me to play with you? Suddenly, a soft voice sounded. A figure quickly flew over and stopped not far from Bai Yu. He was staring at the latter with a cold smile. "Since Brother Hua has such an intention, how can I not accompany you?" Bai Yu smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in his smile. He glanced at Qin Feng and spread his hands helplessly, meaning that he could only help up to this point. The rest was up to Qin Feng. Nodding his head, Qin Feng didn't delay. He quickly mobilized his spiritual energy and poured it into the heaven-splitting axe. Then, with a bang, he combined the heaven-splitting axe and the white jade lotus seat. Qin Feng didn't know how to use a treasure to suppress another treasure, so he could only rely on luck. Buzz! Just as his spiritual energy poured into the sky-splitting axe, the latter trembled slightly and emitted an extremely soft buzzing sound. A strange fluctuation flowed from his body through his meridians and into his palm. Then, it spread to the frantically struggling precious weapon. Just as the ripples spread out, the frantic struggle of the white jade lotus seat came to an abrupt halt. Even the fluorescence on its surface dimmed. Faintly, Qin Feng seemed to feel a sense of fear emanating from the white jade lotus seat. Looking at the white jade lotus seat, that suddenly became as docile as a kitten, Qin Feng's heart was filled with pleasant surprise. With a flip of his palm, he immediately stored it into his space ring. Ha ha! Qin Feng couldn't help but laugh. With this kind of flying heaven artifact, his combat ability in the air would be greatly improved when he fought against 9th stage Heavenly Realm Masters in the future. He even felt that even if he faced masters like Su Yu and Yi Hong now, it would be much easier. But soon, he found that the atmosphere was a little different. The surroundings were too quiet, and only his carefree laughter echoed. Qin Feng came to his senses and the smile on his face instantly disappeared, becoming indifferent. At this time, the battle for the heaven artifact had also come to an end. Su Yu and Su Yu each obtained one, while the other two were obtained by the Yin Sect's Young Master and the Mountain Gate Sect's Little Mountain Gate. The heaven artifact had an owner, but many people were dissatisfied. The source of this dissatisfaction was mostly Qin Feng. After all, the prestige of the first two in Sin City was too great, and no one dared to offend them. The second two came from two great forces, and they were also feared. It seemed that only Qin Feng was a lone ranger. Many people's eyes began to flicker. More and more people surged into this place. Most of them revealed regretful expressions when they heard that the heaven artifact here already had an owner. However, when some news spread out, some people's eyes lit up and the gazes they used to look at Qin Feng changed. Qin Feng naturally felt the changes in the eyes of the people around him. His face was indifferent as he clenched his hand and the heaven-splitting axe appeared in a flash. A sharp aura suddenly burst out like a sharp blade. I, Qin Feng, want this heaven artifact. If anyone is dissatisfied, feel free to make a move. His voice carried a bit of coldness as it swept through the hall like a cold wind. His voice was fierce and unquestionable, seeming exceptionally domineering and overbearing. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The experts of the Hui clan and the young master of the Yin sect also looked at Qin Feng with sneers in their eyes. In their eyes, Qin Feng's move was extremely stupid. Did he think that with his strength, he could keep the treasure artifact? In the distance, Lin Kuei, Bo Jian, and the others' expressions were not very good. In terms of strength, they were not inferior to the young master of the Yin sect. However, the heaven artifact was not a one-on-one battle. At this time, the benefits of a force were highlighted. No matter how powerful one was, it was impossible to contend against an entire force. In the other two directions, Huiyuan and Bai Yu were both staring at Qin Feng. The former's eyes were filled with cold covetousness and greed, while the latter's expression was somewhat complicated. He had helped Qin Feng just now because Qin Feng was close to the Guanghan Palace. However, it was more because the person who attacked him was Zhou Ji. If it had been someone else, Bai Yu was not confident that he would have given up on the heaven artifact and made a move immediately. Now that the final heavenly artifact had landed in Qin Feng's hands, it seemed to be the easiest one to seize. Although he didn't want to be the first to seize it, if there was really an opportunity, he might as well grab it. In fact, with the strength of the House of Bai and the Hui clan, they should have been popular candidates for the heaven artifact. However, the two clans had deep grudges against each other and always wanted to interfere with each other so that the other would gain nothing. However, they did not expect to benefit others in the end. Feeling the biting cold aura emanating from Qin Feng's body, many people were slightly hesitant. They all knew about Qin Feng's performance outside, so no one wanted to be the first to do so. For a moment, the atmosphere in the large hall was somewhat strange. Upon seeing this, Qin Feng's expression was calm. The spiritual energy in his body began to circulate. Then, he suddenly clenched his hand and the white jade lotus seat from before appeared in his hand. Biting the tip of his tongue, he spat out a mouthful of essence blood. At the same time, mental energy surged and wrapped around the ball of essence blood, directly fusing it into the white jade lotus seat in his hand. Buzz buzz! As the essence blood fused into the heaven artifact, the surface of the latter immediately glowed with a white light. Then, the light grew brighter and the originally unremarkable lotus seat immediately flickered with a faint glow. It was as if it had been cleansed of dust, blossoming with the elegance it should have. Bastard, you actually dare to use your blood to bind it to you. Qin Feng's actions were extremely swift. Therefore, when the heaven artifact completed its transformation, the crowd only regained their senses. Immediately, their faces were as black as the bottom of a pot. Previously, the white jade lotus seat was an ownerless object. Whoever was the first to plant their essence blood in it would be called the owner of the heaven artifact. Now, it was very obvious that Qin Feng had already completely taken possession of this heaven artifact. Although they could still erase the essence blood brand if they snatched it back, it would be extremely troublesome. Chapter 585. Mysterious ruins. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly turned silent as the hearts of the various experts surged. They were extremely afraid of the explosion. Back then, she was an existence that could send Yi Hong flying with a single move. No one dared to provoke her. Qin Feng coldly glanced at the crowd. Now that things had come to this, he no longer needed to hide his strength. Facing these ruthless and ambitious characters who didn't care about their lives, he had to display a sufficiently domineering attitude to make them feel apprehensive. "If you don't want to die, you can come and fight," Qin Feng loudly said. However, just as the atmosphere became more and more tense, an unforeseen event suddenly occurred. Suddenly, an endless amount of golden light erupted from the ground that was covered in cracks. Like a wriggling ocean, golden ripples spread out. In the end, under the dumbfounded gazes of countless people, it turned into a giant golden vortex. The golden whirlpool slowly rotated as it became faster and faster. A suction force also rapidly grew from weak to strong. Boom! The golden whirlpool suddenly exploded as it violently rotated. A black hole appeared at the center, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, bottomless. At the same time, an extremely strong suction force suddenly erupted. Actually, at the instant when the golden vortex erupted, Qin Feng, who was above the vortex, had already felt that something was not right. However, before he had the time to leave, the suction force had already acted on his body. It was forcefully pulling him towards the bottom of the golden whirlpool. Qin Feng's face was abnormally ugly. No matter how he struggled, his body was slowly being pulled into the whirlpool. It was as if his body was imprisoned and any resistance was futile. Finally, Qin Feng was pulled into the black hole at the center of the golden whirlpool and completely disappeared. The sudden situation caused everyone's face to drastically change as they all wanted to escape. However, the suction force of the whirlpool had increased and everyone in the hall was passively sucked into the whirlpool. Even Su Yi and the rest were sucked into it. Countless figures were sucked into the black hole like a swarm of locusts. Qin Feng was absent-minded for an instant, before he instantly regained his senses. Just as he was about to flee, he was once again startled. What appeared before his eyes was a dark gray tunnel. He could not see the end of the tunnel, but it was not dark either. No matter how deep he went, it would always remain dark, which was somewhat mysterious. "What is this place?" Qin Feng's eyes cautiously observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw that there were quite a number of cracks of varying depths on the ground not far away. There were also quite a number of white bone fragments and traces of fire. Clearly, a battle had occurred here. Sure enough, Yi Hong and Qiu Yun have been here, Qin Feng whispered. He now understood that when they were fighting for the heaven artifact, they had inadvertently touched the entrance. As this thought flashed across his mind, Qin Feng's heart was also burning with excitement. What was hidden behind this ancient tomb? He was also very tempted. Qin Feng slowly walked through the messy passageway. Although he did not encounter any more treasures, he did not encounter any obstructions either. It seems that Yi Hong and the rest had cleaned up the place thoroughly. All obstructions had been forcefully destroyed by them. Seeing this situation, Qin Feng could not help but increase his speed as he quickly rushed inside. After another 10 minutes, an unlatched stone door appeared in front of him. Looking at the unlatched stone door, Qin Feng's heart slightly sank. It seems that Yi Hong and the rest had arrived here before him. Since I've mysteriously arrived here, I have to take a look no matter what. In front of the door, Qin Feng hesitated for a moment, before his figure flashed and entered through the unlatched door. As Qin Feng entered through the stone door, the surrounding darkness completely dissipated. When Qin Feng's gaze was cast towards the back of the stone door, his face instantly froze. His mouth was slightly agape as a speechless shock softly sounded out from his mouth. This is a ruin? The vast and desolate land was completely silent. An ancient vicissitude spread from the land, causing the entire space to ripple with a lonely feeling. This was the first feeling Qin Feng had when he entered this space. It was very desolate and ancient, as if his soul was covered in dust. It was very stifling. Where is this? Qin Feng stood on a high slope and stared into the distance. In the distant horizon, the mountain ranges were stacked on top of each other, extending endlessly. And the most conspicuous thing was still in the middle of the mountain range. Numerous palaces were situated there, towering in the horizon. However, these palaces were all in a state of dilapidation. Some of them had already collapsed completely, while others had more than half collapsed. This was a group of dilapidated halls, as if they had experienced a great battle. Even so, it was difficult to conceal their grandeur. It was likely that they had once been incomparably glorious. I wonder what this place is, to think that it could be hidden in this space. Qin Feng's heart trembled as he gazed at the halls in the distance. Although they appeared to be in a rather dilapidated state, their scale was still shocking. Moreover, they seemed to be somewhat similar to the mysterious world below the heavenly secret pavilion. They were both dilapidated and desolate. This should be a powerful sect in the past, but it seems to have suffered a great calamity. A powerful expert took action and sealed this place. The demonic, I said faintly. This is the ruin of an ancient sect? Qin Feng was shocked. It seems so now. The demonic, I nodded. But it's too dilapidated. It's very normal. Every time the heavenly fissures and the invasion of the foreign tribes, it's a world-ending catastrophe. If I'm not wrong, this sect also experienced the heavenly fissures, just like the sealed space on the third level of the heavenly secret pavilion. Qin Feng's mouth twitched. What the hell was the heavenly fissures? Why was it so terrifying? A world-ending catastrophe. He could imagine that during a period of time in the ancient era, after the heavenly fissures and the invasion of the foreign tribes, an extremely fierce battle broke out in this world. It was almost as if the entire world was involved. This place should be one of the battlefield. However, it was clear that this sect, whose strength was unknown to the heavens, was defeated in the battle with the foreign tribes. In the end, the entire sect was massacred. Thinking of this, Qin Feng's heart could not help but feel a little heavy. What exactly was the heavenly fissures? Until now, he still did not have a clear understanding of it. Without a doubt, even such a powerful sect was defeated in the end. It was obvious how terrifying it was. Until now, he also understood that the so-called White Treasure Mountain's treasure was not the ancient tomb. The ancient tomb should be the entrance, and the ruins of this sect from an unknown era were the true core of the treasure. Thinking of this, Qin Feng's eyes could not help but burn. The ruins of this sect were in another space, and it was extremely desolate. Since it was destroyed, no one had come here. This was a true treasure that no one had explored before. Chapter 586. Spiritual Fire? Kid, be careful here, the demon I suddenly said. Qin Feng nodded. He naturally knew that there must be something special about this sect for it to survive until now. I'm not talking about that. The demon I shook his head, his tone solemn. There might be evil beings inside. Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" The demon I was silent for a long while before faintly saying, "This sect is different from the ones in the divination pavilion. They should have encountered evil spirit." Evil spirits? Qin Feng frowned. What are those? The sky beyond heaven is a very mysterious and terrifying race among the alien races. They call themselves evil spirit. This sect should have been buried by evil spirits, the demon I faintly said. What's the difference? Qin Feng asked. The demon I sighed and said, evil spirits are different from other alien races. Normally, after an expert dies in battle, even if their magic power reaches the heavens, they would have completely disappeared after countless years of erosion. However, evil spirits have an ability that no other living beings have. Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He subconsciously asked, "What ability?" "Erosion." The demon eye smiled and faintly sighed. "The tenacity of evil spirits is far beyond your imagination. As long as you are eroded by them, even if you die, the evil power of erosion will not disappear. They can use another method to reappear in the world as evil spirit." Qin Feng's pupils fiercely shrank when he heard this. He said, "Everyone in this sect has been eroded by evil spirits? Have they all become evil spirits?" "Should be." The demon eye nodded and immediately said, "However, the laws of this world do not tolerate alien races. Naturally, that includes evil spirit. The laws of heaven and earth will kill evil spirit. Moreover, the existence that sealed this place back then must have been worried that evil spirits would harm the world, so he sealed them here. After thousands of years, these evil spirits should have been killed by the laws of heaven and earth. However, evil spirits cannot be underestimated. This race's vitality is even more tenacious than a centipede. We can't be sure that all evil spirits have been killed. I'm just worried about that. You have to be careful." Qin Feng nodded seriously. Thinking about the erosion, he suddenly asked, "Old devil, you also have the ability to erode others. Is it related to the evil spirits?" "Hee, you guessed my identity so quickly?" The demonic eye let out a strange laugh. Qin Feng's heart sank. This demon eye was actually an evil spirit from the outer heaven. "Hee, there's no harm in letting you know. Anyway, we're in a coexisting relationship now. You can't leave me, and I can't leave you. What exactly is that race of yours? Why must they invade this world?" Qin Feng sighed softly, his tone inexplicable. The demon eye was silent for a while and did not answer. "What exactly is there in this world that makes you guys not hesitate to activate the heavenly fissure again and again?" There are too many things that a little cultivator like you shouldn't know about." The demonic eye paused for a moment and then said in a low voice, "Let alone a little cultivator like you, even I don't know everything. There are some matters that involve even more distant eras. They can't be traced. If there's really a reason, then it's karma. The karma that was once sowed must be repaid with karma in the future. Just wait, the heavenly fissure still exists. There will be a day when the foreign races will invade on a large scale, and at that time, perhaps the true disaster will begin. And I have a feeling that that day won't be too far away. It's not like the heavenly fissure hasn't happened before. Although there were partial defeats, the final victory will still be on our side. This time, it's the same. If our ancestors can do it, we can do it too," Qin Feng said indifferently. He was not bragging, but he had this kind of confidence and determination. He might still be very insignificant now, but he was confident that one day, he would stand at the peak of this world and look down on all world. At that time, he would know everything that he could not know. This world would still exist for eternity. You're still too inexperienced in the end. Do you think that protecting this world is victory? Ridiculous. Karma is repaid with karma. Before this karma is born, everything is in the endless cycle of reincarnation. Since ancient times, we've all been repaying the karma that was sowed in that era. Before the results, no one can escape." The demonic eye's voice was like a heavy hammer that struck Qin Feng's heart. He said slowly, "The karma of that era? What era was that?" "It was chaos, a mysterious and glorious era that could not be recorded in ancient history. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand. If you really have the chance to stand at the peak of this world in the future, you will naturally know all the secrets then," the demonic eye said indifferently. Hearing this, Qin Feng's mouth twitched, but he did not ask any more questions. He was indeed not qualified to come into contact with that level of things. It was not realistic to think so much. Tossing aside these emotions, Qin Feng looked at the towering palaces in the distance. He licked his dry lips and a trace of passion appeared in his eyes. After that, he did not stop and controlled the white jade lotus seat to quickly fly over there. The palaces in the distance did not seem very far, but in fact, because they were too big, it affected the visual effect. Even with the white jade lotus as a means of transportation, he still had not reached there after more than 10 minutes. After flying for a few more minutes, the quiet sky suddenly had a slight whistling sound, and the sound of the wind became clearer as he approached the palaces. Faintly, there was even a hint of coldness. Qin Feng rushed toward the source of the sound. After a few minutes, a huge abyss appeared in front of him. This abyss was extremely huge, and the bottom was incomparably dark. It was unfathomable. Wind blades that could be seen with the naked eye swept up from the bottom, as if they were tearing the air apart, releasing a terrifying power. What is this place? Qin Feng was surprised, because in the extremely cold wind blades, there seemed to be an extremely scorching aura. Below, there seems to be the fluctuation of spiritual fire, the demonic eye said in surprise. Qin Feng was stunned, and then his eyes blazed. There was spiritual fire here? I'm not sure, but only spiritual fire has this kind of heat. Qin Feng's heart was burning. He did not care about anything else and quickly jumped into the abyss. Although the wind blades were powerful, they could pierce through the body of a half-step apex expert, but he was not one of them. Just based on the toughness of his body, Qin Feng dared to challenge a 2-heaven realm expert. He slowly descended to the bottom. This place was not as dark as he imagined, but the light was dim. The space at the bottom was very big, but there were very few wind blades. However, the gloomy coldness was extremely dense, as if he was in a world of ice, causing the air to be incomparably moist, as if it would soon freeze. But strangely, under this coldness, there were still traces of scorching aura. There's someone here? Qin Feng's eyes swept around, and then fiercely focused. In a place, he saw traces of calcined rock. They were all charred, and when he went closer to touch them, there was still a bit of scorching heat. This was left by someone not long ago, and it could not have been left long ago. Qin Feng's face instantly became solemn. He did not expect that someone would be one step ahead of him. At the same time, his heart slightly sank. Ordinary people would not come to this place, unless they discovered that there were treasures here, then they would choose to torture themselves to come here. Chapter 587. The most difficult thing to heal Qin Feng's expression was a little ugly. The other party's speed was clearly faster than his. Now that there was no trace of that person, he did not know if he had been beaten to it. He quickly began to move. Although the space at the bottom was very large, under his full-speed search, he quickly discovered a huge concealed cave. The cave was pitch black, but there was a faint glow in its depths. It was very mysterious. Qin Feng paused for a moment, before he braced himself and walked in. Crackle, crackle. With a thought, the ancient desolate spirit flame left his body, transforming into countless white specks of light. The flames rose and curled around Qin Feng's surroundings. The specks of light had a very good illumination effect. At the same time, following the appearance of the ancient desolate spirit flame, the surrounding chill completely disappeared. Borrowing the weak light, Qin Feng carefully walked towards the interior of the cave. The cave appeared very spacious, with wind blades whistling past from time to time. After walking for a few minutes, the surroundings appeared even more spacious. The light also gradually became brighter, and one could barely see the outline of the cave. Qin Feng withdrew the ancient desolate spirit flame, and scanned his surroundings. This place seems to be reaching the depths. He could clearly see a huge and blurry black figure standing in front of him. It seemed to be the depths of the cave, and there was no road ahead. However, just as Qin Feng was puzzled, a weak sound mixed with some pain was transmitted over, causing him to immediately explode. He forcefully suppressed the feeling in his heart, and his gaze moved back and forth in the depths of the cave. Moments later, it stopped on a clean rock. There was a figure lying there. Based on the exquisite figure, it should be a woman. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Qin Feng slowly approached the woman. A wisp of white flame rose from the tip of his finger, and slowly floated in front of the woman under his guidance. The clear light allowed him to clearly see the outline of the woman's body. The first thing that entered his eyes was a light purple dress. However, it appeared to be very messy. Occasionally, as the woman wriggled, it would reveal a portion of her long, tender, jade-like legs, which possessed an indescribable allure. However, Qin Feng's gaze didn't linger on those long legs that could make people lose their mind. Instead, it slowly moved up to her flat stomach, her long neck that was as white as a swan's, and finally stopped at that face. There was a thin veil covering her face. However, the veil had already slipped to one side, revealing a peerless beauty that could make any man fall head over heels for her. "What a beautiful woman!" Just as Qin Feng exclaimed in surprise in his heart, his expression paused for a moment, and then it suddenly became interesting. Wasn't this girl Qiu Yun from Taishan Academy? Qin Feng's face became strange. He didn't expect that the person who came in before him was Qiu Yun of Taishan Academy. Looking at her current weak appearance, she should have suffered some serious injuries. At this moment, the dazzling light made Qiu Yun feel something. She opened her beautiful eyes and saw a person standing not far away. Her expression changed slightly. Because of the dazzling light, she couldn't see who it was and whether it was hostile. However, her current situation was very bad. She could only look at the figure for help. Her red lips moved. "Can you help me?" Qin Feng's expression gradually calmed down. His eyes flickered. To be honest, although she was a woman, those who could enter here were all competitors. Moreover, Qiu Yun was a very formidable competitor. No matter who it was, he was afraid that no one would be a good person who would help a competitor. Moreover, she had attacked him. In this place, even if it was someone else, Qin Feng might not necessarily help, let alone someone who had a grudge with Jingwei. Qin Feng looked at Qiu Yun, who was in a very bad situation. After a moment of silence, he turned and left. "Help me, will you?" However, just as he turned, Qiu Yun's weak and pleading voice came from behind again. Qin Feng paused slightly, his expression uncertain. To save or not to save? Qin Feng felt a little troubled in his heart. If he were to save her, he would be extremely unwilling in his heart. But when he heard her pleading voice, he was unable to harden his heart and leave. He knew that if no one helped, Qiu Yun would most likely stay here. Since she and Jingwei had a hostile relationship, it was impossible for him to be on good terms with her. To be honest, it was already very good that he didn't hit her when she was down. "This damned woman, if you don't have the strength, why did you come here? Looking for death?" Qin Feng cursed angrily in his heart. After all, he couldn't be indifferent and leave her in the lurch. Moreover, he might be able to find out about Jingwei through her. Qin Feng turned and walked towards Qiu Yun. "What's going on?" Qin Feng came to Qiu Yun's side and squatted down. At a close distance, he discovered that Qiu Yun's body was burning with a thin layer of flame. This wasn't the pink flame that she used before. It was similar to pink with a tinge of brown. The flames burned on her body, causing a large portion of her exposed skin to be suffused with a reddish hue, appearing somewhat alluring. "How can I help you?" Qin Feng asked. Qiu Yun's face was flushed red. Her smooth forehead was covered with beads of sweat. Her starry eyes were blurred as she looked at Qin Feng in front of her. It took her a while to react. "It's you." Qiu Yun's pretty face was also a little strange. Obviously, she didn't expect Qin Feng to appear here. However, this strangeness was quickly replaced by pain. Her beautiful eyes were tightly shut, and the blush on her fair face was even more intense. Her body couldn't help but squirm, revealing a large patch of white skin. Looking at Qiu Yun's appearance, Qin Feng couldn't help but feel an evil fire rising in his lower abdomen. Damn, this scene was too torturous. He was a man, and a normal man at that. How could he resist such temptation? If you want me to help you, at least tell me what's going on? Qin Feng forcefully suppressed the evil fire in his heart and asked with a frown. However, Qiu Yun did not reply to his question. Her red lips were slightly parted as she exhaled a fragrant breath. Her delicate body grew increasingly hot. Looking at this scene, Qin Feng's mouth twitched. This woman's consciousness was probably blurred. However, if she didn't say anything, how could he save her? Old man, what should I do? Qin Feng asked in his heart. There are two ways. One is simple, the other is complicated. The demon, I said slowly. However, Qin Feng felt that the tone was a little strange. She has 3 types of flames in her body. She should have suppressed them well before. However, she must have experienced something here that caused 2 of the flames that weren't completely merged to riot and devour each other. This is because the fire in her heart has caused some changes in her body. The simplest way is to directly extinguish the fire. How to extinguish it? Qin Feng gritted his teeth and asked. He seemed to have guessed something. How to extinguish it? The demon, I suddenly laughed. There was a treachery hidden in the laughter that made Qin Feng speechless. How do you usually extinguish the fire? It's the same for men and women. However, one will transform into yang fire, while the other will transform into yin fire. The fire in her body has already transformed into pure yin fire. If it's not extinguished, her body will be completely incinerated. The best way is to f*ck her. Hearing the demon eye's understatement, Qin Feng suddenly felt a headache coming on. Wasn't f*king her courting death? Although he was doing whatever he wanted to her now and doing those dirty things in order to save her, Qin Feng knew that such a woman with an ice-cold temperament was very arrogant in her bones. Ordinary men would not be able to enter her eyes at all. If he were to do her, he was afraid that after he was done, he would be hunted down endlessly by her. What about the more complicated method? Qin Feng said helplessly. He wouldn't dare to use such a simple method no matter what. Hee kid, such a peerless beauty is rare. Are you sure you can't f*ck her? The demon eye laughed extremely treacherously. If she f*king me, I won't object. Looking at the beauty in front of him, Qin Feng licked his lips and asked irritably, hurry up and tell me the second method. I don't think she can hold on for much longer. The demon eye laughed and didn't say much. He said, the second method is more dangerous. It will test your ability to control fire. The 2 types of fire in her body are far inferior to the ancient desolate spiritual flame. Use it to suppress the 2 flames and give her time to recover. Once she recovers, she will naturally have a way to deal with the current situation. However, this method is very dangerous. If you make a mistake and cause the ancient desolate spiritual flame to run amok in her body, there's no need to save her. She will be burned to ashes directly. The demon, I said seriously. She's not you. She won't be able to withstand the power of the ancient desolate spiritual flame. I personally prefer the first method. It's simple and clear. Qin Feng grinned. He also wanted the first method. It was simple and convenient, but would it work? Even if this Qiu Yun were to die, she would not allow anyone to taint her pure body. I'll choose the second method. Qin Feng's heart was filled with regret as he sighed. He was just about to activate the ancient desolate spirit flame. However, before he had the time to move, 2 lotus root-like delicate arms suddenly wrapped around his neck. A seemingly soft and boneless lovely body also stuck to Qin Feng's chest like a water snake. A delicate fragrance surged into his nose. Fuck! With the fragrant softness in his arms, Qin Feng immediately got up. Blood rushed to his brain. However, he had experienced a similar situation with Gong Xiaoxi and Su Xiaochun. Hence, he quickly restrained himself. That's right. The fire in her body is somewhat connected to your ancient, desolate spiritual flame. If you do it with her, it will be of great help to the accumulation of yin-yang energy in your body. Tisk tsk, the power of yin and yang is really mysterious. If you use the normal yin and yang method to mix, not only will you be able to resolve her crisis, both of you will also benefit greatly. The demon I was still encouraging Qin Feng to use the first method. Qin Feng ignored it and pushed away the softness in his arms. However, his rejection provoked an instinctive resistance from the softness in his arms. She burrowed into his arms. Qin Feng firmly suppressed Qin Feng. He suddenly quivered. In his daze, he was already pressed down by Qiu Yun. The latter tightly wrapped around him like an octopus, making it impossible for him to move. This kind of beauty was self-evident. However, Qin Feng knew that if things continued to develop like this, he would enjoy a moment of pleasure. However, there would be countless troubles in the future. He reached out for the lotus root-like wrist that was tightly wrapped around his neck. Forcing himself to calm down, Qin Feng tried his best to block the perception of his body, allowing Qiu Yun to abuse his body. Qin Feng held his breath and concentrated. He drew out the ancient desolate spiritual flame in his body and wrapped it with spirit energy. Then, he followed Qiu Yun's wrist and drilled into her body. As for himself, he couldn't resist. So be it. Qin Feng thought so. However, whether he could break free from Qiu Yun and treat her, only he knew. In any case, he was forced to treat her. As long as she didn't lose her virginity, it would be fine. As for the rest, in Qin Feng's opinion, he would just let her do it this time. Spiritual energy wrapped around the ancient desolate spiritual flame as it slowly flowed within Qiu Yun's body. When the fiery energy that filled her meridians came into contact with the ancient desolate spiritual flame, it quickly avoided it, not daring to come into contact with Ying Feng. Inside the cave, the scenery of spring was boundless. The overflowing feeling of spring made people unable to help but blush, and their hearts beat faster. In the eyes of others, this was a kind of enjoyment. However, to Qin Feng, this was a torture worse than death. His loved ones were about to explode. But even so, he still had to hold his breath and concentrate on controlling the ancient desolate spiritual flame that was entering Qiu Yun's body. Because just as the devil I had said, Qiu Yun was different from him. The ancient desolate spiritual flame would only make him feel restricted. Chapter 588. To retire with success, however, Qin Feng's control over the ancient desolate spiritual flames had clearly reached a very precise level. The flames smoothly passed through her meridians and poured into Qiu Yun's aura sea. Upon entering her aura sea, Qin Feng could feel the boundless heat waves. Her aura sea was filled with scorching heat. Two different colored flames, one pink and the other dark brown, were engaged in an intense confrontation. However, the pink flame should have the upper hand as more than half of the space was filled with the pink flame. However, it was only the pink flame that had the upper hand. It was rather difficult for the pink flame to suppress the dark brown flame. At this moment, Qin Feng finally understood why Qiu Yun was in such a state. It turned out that the two flames were clashing and no one could do anything to the other. When the ancient desolate spiritual flames entered, it immediately caused the two flames to fiercely resist. However, Qin Feng did not panic in the slightest. The spiritual energy that enveloped the ancient desolate spiritual flames gradually expanded, forming a protective barrier that contained the ancient desolate spiritual flames within. Thereafter, he allowed the other two flames to invade and entangle with it. It had to be said that a spiritual flame like the ancient desolate spiritual flames was indeed domineering. In terms of the degree of scorching heat, the ancient desolate spiritual flames was perhaps barely comparable to the dark brown flame. It was much weaker compared to the pink flame. However, in the face of the powerful suppression of the two flames, it was clearly more powerful. It directly opened its mouth and enveloped the two flames. Fighting one against two, it was directly suppressed. The ancient, desolate spiritual flames turned into a white fireball and enveloped the two flames. The two flames violently struggled. One could see that the pink and brown flames occupied 2/3 of the white fireball. However, even so, they were unable to break free from the suppression of the ancient, desolate spiritual flames. On the contrary, as time passed, the resistance of the two flames gradually weakened. The two colors that occupied most of the fireball were gradually separated. 2/3, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. Not long after, the pink and dark brown flames were suppressed to the point where they were unable to resist. They could only turn into two different colored energy balls and tightly stick together. As the two colored flames were suppressed, the scorching heat in his aura calmed down. The fiery energy in his meridians also returned to his aura and was absorbed into the energy ball. The crimson color on Qiu Yun's body also slowly faded away. At a certain moment, the spiritual energy that had been burned like flames recovered, and Qiu Yun's rationality also returned to her mind. In an instant, the enchanting charm on her pretty face disappeared. Her pair of beautiful eyes slowly opened, and the blurriness in her eyes gradually returned to clarity. Thus, her pair of beautiful eyes slowly widened. 4 pairs of eyes met. In an instant, it was as if lightning flashed. However, the 4 pairs of lips were still tightly pressed together. Qiu Yun's mind was in a mess. After a brief moment of blankness, she collected her thoughts. Her eyes were filled with icy murderous intent. Qin Feng could feel the rapidly surging spiritual energy in her body. Even her aura was violently fluctuating, as if it was about to shatter the white energy ball formed by the ancient spiritual desolate flames. If you don't want to die, then calm down. Qin Feng took the initiative to leave the softness, and said in an icy voice. At the same time, the ancient spiritual desolate flames also rapidly expanded, threatening her. Qiu Yun was stunned. She could also feel an extremely scorching aura in her body. However, that scorching aura had to be suppressed. Otherwise, if it was released, she had no doubt that she would be burned from the inside out. You shameless! Qiu Yun did not dare to move. Her ice-cold face was flushed red, and her eyes were filled with anger and shame. There are only 2 ways to save you. Either I have sex with you, or I suppress the 2 balls of flames in your body. You can check the condition of your body. Qin Feng did not waste any time with her, and directly went to the point. Hearing this, Qiu Yun's mind immediately sank into her body. Immediately, she saw that the 2 types of flames that made her wish she was dead were suppressed in a white energy ball. She raised her head, and there was unconcealable shock in her eyes. You actually suppressed the 2 flames in my body? She knew that the 3 types of flames in her body were difficult to produce. Only one of them had completely fused with her body, and the other 2 had yet to completely fuse. The collision between the medicinal flame and the beast flame had brought her great pain, because they were 2 completely different types of flames. She did not expect that it would be so easily suppressed by Qin Feng. However, when she thought of his godly mastery of fire control, she understood in her heart. If not... Qin Feng glanced at her red and swollen, alluring red lips and curled his lips. However, he pretended to have an unhappy expression and said, "You should know your own situation. You were the one who pounced on me and I had no way to resist. Moreover, I am currently treating you and need to expend a large portion of my attention. If you move recklessly, your little life would have already been lost." Qiu Yun's charming face instantly turned red. She did not doubt Qin Feng's words. Looking at this posture, she was indeed the one who initiated it. Furthermore, he was indeed concentrating on treating her, and did not move recklessly. This kind of shameful feeling made Qiu Yun's face so red that it could drip blood. However, under Qin Feng's low shout, she did not dare to move recklessly. This was because Qin Feng was holding her wrist, controlling the scorching flames in her body. If she lost control, what kind of situation would it cause? Just thinking about it made her heart tremble. The flames in your body have already been controlled by me. Now, can you suppress these two types of flames? Qin Feng asked. Qiu Yun's face was red as she nodded. Good. Now, let's prepare for the exchange. You will control the flames in your body, and I will draw out my strength. Hearing this, Qiu Yun's face became serious. Under her control, the rich spiritual energy in her body flowed into her qi sea. The third scarlet flame swept out, and then slowly approached the white energy ball. Let's begin. Qin Feng's face was solemn as he controlled the ancient desolate spiritual flame to quickly retreat. The two types of flames that had lost the suppression of the ancient desolate spiritual flame were about to counterattack, but they were surrounded by a rich spiritual energy and scarlet flame. Seeing the two types of flames being suppressed, Qin Feng secretly let out a sigh of relief. His spiritual energy wrapped around the ancient desolate spiritual flame and quickly pulled it out of Qiu Yun's body. Just as his spiritual energy was pulled out, Qin Feng immediately let go of Qiu Yun's wrist and retreated. His body slipped, and he left her suppression. The latter did not have time to be shy. She casually tidied up her clothes, sat down, and began to suppress the two types of flames, causing them to quickly fuse. However, as the flames around her disappeared, the chill in the cave attacked again. Ignore it! Qin Feng lightly shouted. With a flick of his finger, the ancient desolate spiritual flame shot out and turned into a white light curtain around the two of them. The white flame burned on the light curtain, and the chill in the wind blade was blocked outside. At this point, Qin Feng had roughly guessed that two of the three types of flames in Qiu Yun's body should not have been completely fused by her. After entering here, she had been using the flames to resist the chill. Perhaps it was because she had used too much that it caused the two types of flames to go berserk. This light curtain can restrain the chill in here. You should first fuse the two types of flames here. Chapter 589. Netherworld bead. Only after Qin Feng left did the redness on Qiu Yun's face gradually fade. She opened her eyes and looked in the direction that Qin Feng had left with a complicated look in her eyes. Thank you. After a long while, an indescribable voice slowly sounded out and gently floated within the white light screen. After looking around for a while, he did not find anything special, nor was there any fluctuation of spiritual fire. This made Qin Feng astonished. Even Qiu Yun had risked her life to come here, so how could there be nothing here? Could it be that this woman beat me to it? Qin Feng glanced at Qiu Yun, who was sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed. A moment later, he shook his head. When he was treating her, he could sense that there was not the slightest fluctuation of spiritual fire on her body. However, they were already in the depths of the cave, and there was no path ahead. If the spiritual fire was not here, then where was it? There's something wrong with the wall in front. Just as he was puzzled, the demonic eye's voice suddenly rang out. Qin Feng was taken aback. He quickly walked towards the wall and gently touched it with his hand. Immediately, a bone-chilling chill passed through his fingertips and reached the bottom of his heart. There's indeed a problem. Qin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. After that, he started to feel around on the wall. A few minutes later, his hands touched nothing, causing him to be stunned. The wall before his eyes was still there, but at the place where his hands touched, there was no feeling at all. A fake wall. Qin Feng understood. No wonder there were wind blades coming from the wall. It turned out that someone had used some method to confuse his vision. He softly chuckled as he directly passed through the fake wall. What entered his eyes was a huge palace. This palace was too huge, and its entire body was gray. It made people feel an indescribable pressure. That is... Qin Feng was stunned for a moment. He noticed that there was a stone platform in front of him. On the stone platform there was a speck of light. It looked like a flame, but also like a pill. Its shape seemed to be constantly changing. Qin Feng walked closer and felt an extremely hot temperature from the speck of light. This temperature far exceeded the temperature of the two flames in Qiu Yun's body. It was quite terrifying. "This is Fireheart, demon," I said. "Fireheart." Qin Feng was surprised and asked, "What is a Fireheart?" "The origin of fire is just like the fire spirit of spiritual fire. However, the fire spirit is of a much higher level than the Fireheart." "The demonic," I said. "It's impossible for ordinary flames to have a fire heart. Only extremely powerful and innately powerful flames can condense a fire heart. Or when flames fuse and devour each other, there's a chance that a fire heart will be born. Normally, a flame that can condense a fire core has a higher level than other flames. This is because it already has the consciousness to devour other flames. It can level up. In that case, it can also evolve into a spiritual fire." Qin Feng's heart moved slightly. "In that case, wouldn't the spiritual fire be able to be mass-produced?" "Impossible. Spiritual flames are born from the heavens and the earth, born from the will of the heavens and the earth. No matter how powerful other flames are, they will never be able to advance to spiritual flames. They can only be infinitely close to it. Among them, an extremely rare few might be blessed by the heavens and evolve into pseudo-spiritual flames. This is also the limit. No wonder that little girl took the risk to come here. It seems that she sensed it in advance." The demonic eye paused and looked at Qin Feng, who was drooling. He said, "The fire heart is extremely useful to her, but it won't be of any benefit to you. Your Taoist flame is the ancient desolate spiritual flame, which is a spiritual fire." Qin Feng nodded. There wasn't the slightest regret on his face, but the drooling in his eyes didn't disappear. He directly used the ancient desolate spiritual flame and wrapped it into his body. "As I said, the fire heart won't be of any help to you." "The demonic," I said. Qin Feng grinned and said with a smile, "I know it's useless, but isn't it very useful to some people? The value of the fire heart varies from person to person. I think it can be sold for a good price." The demonic eye. After putting away the fire heart, Qin Feng also began to look at the huge palace. The palace was grayish-black, and the air was filled with a sense of vicissitudes. There were many stone pillars supporting the palace, and there was nothing special about it except that it looked quite ancient. However, after entering this place, he felt uncomfortable, and he didn't know the source of this feeling. It was as if this palace was somewhat incompatible with the real world. After looking around for a while, Qin Feng frowned and said, "There doesn't seem to be anything else here." "Old devil, did you find anything?" Qin Feng asked. At that time, this guy said there were traces of the spiritual fire. After a moment of silence, the demonic eye said, "Look at that fire pillar." Qin Feng glanced at it and was speechless. That fire has already, before he finished speaking, he suddenly stopped. Qin Feng's eyes widened. "There's a spiritual fire there? Let's go and see." Qin Feng nodded and quickly flew to the fire pillar. At the top there was a fire shelf, but there was only a thumb-sized black bead. This startled him. "Old devil, what's the situation?" "The netherworld bead, as expected." The demonic eye didn't answer directly, but sighed softly. "We came here for nothing?" Hearing the sigh, Qin Feng felt a chill in his heart. "Not completely." The demonic eye shook his head and said, "The netherworld earth fire should have existed here before. It is very likely that the strongest of this sect had once subdued it. Following the destruction of this place, the netherworld earth fire also left. However, this spiritual fire is somewhat different from other spiritual fires. It comes from under the earth, and is formed by gathering the power of the earth. Therefore, the fire spirit that is born is extremely close to the earth. It can borrow the power of the earth to give birth to fire spirit essence. After thousands of years of nurturing by the power of the earth, it condenses into a bead called the netherworld bead. The netherworld bead in your hand is formed by the power of the earth and the fire spirit of the netherworld earth fire. In the future, you can rely on the netherworld bead and the netherworld earth fire to sense each other. Perhaps you can find traces of the netherworld earth fire. Hearing this, Qin Feng sighed softly. It was impossible to say that he wasn't disappointed. Fortunately, he didn't have too much hope before. Now that he could find traces of the netherworld earth fire, it was a good harvest. Collecting his thoughts, Qin Feng put away the netherworld bead. Just as he put it down, a sound came from outside and Qiu Yun walked in. After seeing Qin Feng, Qiu Yun's beautiful face flushed unnaturally and seductively. However, it was covered by a veil and no one could see it. Your problem is solved? Qin Feng also saw Qiu Yun walk in, and his slightly depressed face instantly recovered its indifference. Seeing Qin Feng walk over, Qiu Yun unnaturally took a step back. Seeing this, Qin Feng didn't approach and stopped not far away. Thank you for what you did just now. Qiu Yun's clear and cold voice trembled in an unusual manner. Her delicate body was a little stiff, and her ears behind the veil were a little red. It's just a small matter. Qin Feng smiled awkwardly. Thinking about it, his face was also a little unnatural. After all, it was impossible for an innocent little virgin like him to face the absurd thing that happened just now. Chapter 590. To confront each other, what is the relationship between you and Jingwei? In the end, Qin Feng broke the silence and asked with a serious expression. He is a scoundrel. Speaking of this person, Qiu Yun also regained her calm. Looking at Qin Feng, her eyes flashed with killing intent. Since you are acquainted with him, you should know what kind of person he is, right? Seeing a trace of anger in Qiu Yun's eyes, Qin Feng understood that Jingwei must have seen the beauty of life and had a cheap mouth. He is like this, lecherous but not daring, Qin Feng said. He took liberties with me and the princess of the Heavenly Dragon Empire, Tan Tan. He even tricked the three of us and snatched the things that we worked so hard to obtain. You say he doesn't have the guts? Qiu Yun looked at Qin Feng and said coldly. Qin Feng was stunned. This Jingwei was really not easy to deal with. He even dared to take liberties with a student of the Imperial Mystery Academy and the princess of the Heavenly Dragon Empire. After entering this world, Qin Feng naturally crammed all kinds of information about this world, especially the Great Northwest. The vast territory was boundless and there were countless empires. The Great Yin Empire was only a small empire among the many empires, while the Heavenly Dragon Empire was a large empire. Moreover, it was one of the top 10 large empires. In terms of national strength, the two could not be compared at all. Qin Feng did not expect that Tan Tan's status was not low. However, Jingwei was still in the same group as him, so he said, "Taking liberties with others is indeed wrong, but I don't agree with you saying that he snatched your things. Since everyone is fighting for it, what's wrong with him obtaining it with his own strength? That is because you don't know what despicable methods he used to deceive us, pretending to be in the same group as us. If we did not block so many dangers in front of him, how could he have succeeded?" Qiu Yun said coldly. The process is nothing more than a means to achieve one's goal. There's nothing wrong with that. You're all working for him, but that's also a problem of your ability. He's just using all available conditions to achieve his goal. In the fight for opportunities, whoever has the ability will have the last laugh. Don't tell me you don't understand this simple logic. He didn't do anything wrong in this matter. It's just that you refuse to accept the shame of failure, Qin Feng said. Qiu Yun frowned and snorted. You're on his side. Naturally, you'll speak for him. Qin Feng shook his head and was too lazy to argue with her. He asked, where is he? Also, with his strength, how could he have tricked you? When he first entered this world, Jing Wui's strength was similar to his. Even now, without the big explosion, Qin Feng didn't think that he could trick these three people. He ran away a long time ago. Qiu Yun pursed her lips and glanced at Qin Feng. He's much more powerful than you think. If there's no accident, he should have broken through to the two-heaven stage with the help of that thing. Hearing this, Qin Feng's heart trembled. Two-heaven stage. What exactly did Jing Wui experience to increase his strength so quickly? During this period of time, he felt that his growth was fast enough. He had a lot of treasures, defensive treasures, offensive treasures, flying heaven tools, and the opportunities of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secret. It was impossible to put them in the primitive land, but even so, he was only at the peak of half a step. On the other hand, Jing Wui had most likely reached the two heavens stage. The gap between them was simply too big. However, Qin Feng could also imagine that Jing Wui must have had a lot of opportunities. To be able to reach this step, he must have paid a lot. Jing Wui was already so strong, so Qin Feng didn't worry about his safety. However, it also aroused his competitive spirit. In the beginning, their strength was almost the same, but now the gap was too big. Restraining his emotions, Qin Feng looked at Qiu Yun. Since he couldn't get any news about Jing Wui, he was too lazy to ask any more and was about to leave. Wait a minute. Qiu Yun stood in front of Qin Feng. First, she looked around, then turned her gaze back to Qin Feng. She said in an uncertain tone, "Before, I felt an extremely hot aura here. It should be a kind of flame of high quality. I don't know if you saw it." Her tone sounded like a question, but if one listened carefully, one could hear a trace of strangeness. How was this uncertain? She was clearly asking him where he kept the flame. Of course, Qin Feng understood Qiu Yun's meaning. He didn't intend to hide it. He opened his palm and a flame flashed. He looked at Qiu Yun, whose beautiful eyes were filled with unconcealable joy, and said with a smile, "Are you talking about this fire heart?" "What? You said this is the fire heart?" Qiu Yun's beautiful eyes suddenly widened, and an unconcealable shock appeared in those beautiful eyes. "You should be looking for this, right?" Qin Feng nodded and asked with a smile. Staring blankly at the flame floating in Qin Feng's palm, Qiu Yun came back to her senses after a long while. She looked at Qin Feng, and her eyes became slightly complicated. The fire heart was something that only people who understood fire very well would know. Ordinary people didn't know what the fire heart was, but from his words it seemed to be very common. Yes, he also had an extremely mysterious flame, so it was normal for him to know something about the fire heart. Thinking of this, Qiu Yun felt relieved. Looking at the fire heart in front of her, the depths of her eyes surged with passion and excitement. She originally thought that it was just a flame of a higher quality, but she never expected it to be the fire heart. For someone who was good at using fire, the temptation of the fire heart was probably no less than Qin Feng's desire to improve his physical body in order to use the forbidden technique. "Thank you very much." Qiu Yun sincerely thanked him, and then one of her jade-like hands slowly reached out to the fire heart floating in Qin Feng's palm. However, Qin Feng took a step back, causing him to pounce onto empty air. Qiu Yun was stunned, and looked at Qin Feng in confusion. "Miss Qiu, you don't have the right to take this." Qin Feng clenched his hand, put away the fire heart, and said with a smile. Qiu Yun was stunned, and when Qin Feng's voice sounded, she frowned again and said seriously, "I found it first, so it should belong to me. Of course, out of gratitude, I will also give you some compensation." Qin Feng shook his head slightly, took another step back, and looked at her with a smile. "What do you mean? Do you want to take it for yourself?" Seeing Qin Feng's actions, Qiu Yun's face gradually darkened, and her voice was cold. "Take it for myself?" Qin Feng shook his head with a smile, and said, "The fire heart is an ownerless object, and it belongs to whoever has it. It has never been in your hands, so I took it." How can I take it for myself? But I found it first, so I should have a share. Chiu Yun said with conviction, not feeling that she was being unreasonable. First of all, let me tell you that these ownerless treasures don't belong to whoever finds them. Only the capable can get them. Don't tell me you don't understand such a simple logic. Glancing at Chiu Yun, Qin Feng continued, moreover, I didn't come here to follow your footsteps, so there's no such thing as a partnership. Therefore, the things here belong to whoever finds them. Do you think that someone will give you a share of the things that they worked so hard to find just because you know of its existence? If you think so, then I seem to have saved you just now. If I didn't save you just now, you would be a charred corpse now, and you wouldn't have the chance to touch anything here. Chapter 591. A failed extortion. Chiu Yun's voice faltered. Although she was furious, she could not find any words to refute him. Thinking about it carefully, she did not have the right to make Qin Feng hand over Hua Xian. Moreover, she had only managed to survive because of his help earlier. At the end of the day, she owed him a favor. However, Hua Xian was just too important to her. It had not been easy for her to get here, and she had almost met with an accident along the way. As such, she was unwilling to return empty-handed. I am indeed very touched by your help. Today I owe you a favor. If you need it in the future, I will definitely help you. Chiu Yun raised her bright eyes and looked at Qin Feng. She said softly, but Hua Xian is very important to me. You did not hesitate to take the risk to get here, so I hope you can give it to me. Consider it my second favor to you. Hearing this, Qin Feng shook his head and smiled. He said, You haven't even returned the first favor, and you're already in a hurry to owe me a second one? I don't need these illusory things. If you want to talk to me about Hua Xian, then please return the first favor first. After all, I did save you. I suffered quite a bit. You suffered? Chiu Yun could not help but laugh. He was clearly the one who took advantage of her, and now he was saying that she suffered. However, she, who had always been cold, could not bring herself to say such absurd things. She could only glare at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes. I don't have any improper thoughts about you, but I almost lost my virginity in order to save you. Who are you saying suffered? In this world, not all men would submit to your beauty. So, don't think that just because I've taken advantage of you, I should be complacent and feel that I've let you down. Qin Feng said in a deadly earnest manner, angering Chiu Yun so much that her teeth were chattering. She clenched her fists tightly. If not for the fact that she owed him a favor, she really wanted to slap his serious face. Usually, the people she met were all rather forthright. As long as she said a word, those people would throw their heads down, shed their blood, and do their best to please her. It was the first time she met someone like Qin Feng who was so stubborn. Taking in a deep breath of cold air, Chiu Yun tried her best to calm her emotions. A cold glint gradually surged in her bright eyes. I will repay you for saving my life in the future. As for the fire heart, as you said earlier, this kind of thing belongs to the most capable. Isn't that right? What do you want? Qin Feng stared at Chiu Yun and asked with a chuckle. I don't want to think about it. I just want to do as you said and let the capable ones get it. Chiu Yun said indifferently. You want to fight with me, and the stronger one will get the fire heart? Is that wrong? Didn't you say that only the capable can obtain it? It's not yours, so why can't I snatch it? Chiu Yun retorted. If you think you are better than me, then I don't want Hua Xian. Chiu Yun tilted her head and looked at Qin Feng. After a while, she said, But you should not be my opponent now. The smile on Qin Feng's face slowly disappeared. He sneered, Why? Do you want to fight with your benefactor? Don't tie me down with this moral framework. I said that I will repay you for saving me in the future. I will not be too harsh on you. I only hope that when we fight later, when you are in despair, you will know what is good for you. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you saved me. I am determined to obtain the fire heart. Qiuyun frowned and said. Her tone was very firm. Must get. Qin Feng heard this and sneered. Are you so sure that you can defeat me and make me despair? Could it be that I'm not a match for you? Qiuyun did not mind and asked in return. You are very strong. I am not your opponent. Qin Feng shook his head and was not arrogant. He stared straight at Qiuyun. After pausing for a moment, he suddenly said in a soft voice, However, if I want to leave this place, I'm afraid you won't be able to stop me. Qiuyun's eyes narrowed. A pair of beautiful eyes rolled around Qin Feng's body. She wanted to see the truth of Qin Feng's words, but that face of his was as calm as an ancient well. She couldn't see anything. What will it take for you to give me Hua Xin? Qiuyun helplessly asked. She dispelled the thought of forcefully seizing Qin Feng because she truly couldn't see through him. Naturally, with regards to her own strength, she was very confident. However, no matter what, Qin Feng had saved her before. If she could avoid making a move, she would try her best not to. Qin Feng pondered for a moment, and his face showed some hesitation. It is not impossible to give it to you, but what will you give in exchange? What do you want? Qiuyun asked. Qin Feng thought for a moment and said with a smile, Heaven-level battle skills, high-level spells, special treasures of heaven and earth, or something that can help with spiritual cultivation. Qiuyun frowned, and with a flip of her hand, a scroll appeared in her hand. She said, This is a heaven-level battle skill. As expected of someone from Taishan Academy. Qin Feng was secretly shocked. Casually taking out a heaven-ranked battle skill was something many major powers wouldn't be able to do. He shook his head and said, Maybe I didn't express it clearly. What I meant is that you have to take out something that can satisfy me in exchange. A heaven-ranked battle skill is merely one of the many things. Greedy. Qiuyun's beautiful eyes flashed with resentment, but she did not say much. She took out a jade bottle and said, There are 3 drops of 9 heavens spiritual liquid in here. Qin Feng raised his eyebrows, not the slightest bit moved. He could give Yi Dance 4 drops in one go, and he still had dozens of drops on him. Why would he care about 3 drops? Qiuyun frowned. What else do you want? I will take this heaven-level battle skill. As for the 9 heavens spiritual liquid, I am afraid that I have no less than you, so I don't need it. After a pause, Qin Feng continued, But if you can provide something that can enhance spiritual power, maybe I will be a little tempted. Something that can enhance spiritual power? Qiuyun shook her head and said, Don't count on it. This kind of thing is rare on this continent. Even if Taishan Academy has it, I can't get it. Looking at Qiuyun, Qin Feng's smile did not change, and he asked the demon eye in his heart if her words were true. It should be true. Things that can enhance spiritual power are indeed hard to find. Every one of them is a treasure. With her status as a student, it should be impossible for her to have such things, the demon eye said. Hearing this, Qin Feng sighed in his heart. Was there really no way to make up for the shortcoming of his spiritual power? As his strength increased, his spiritual power became more and more useless. But he was also helpless in this regard. It was too difficult to improve his spiritual power quickly. What else can I ask for? Qin Feng pondered. He did not lack money or herbs. The collection of Mount Blackwater and the rewards from Huangfu Huanhuan and the Song clan were too much for him to use up. Old Mo, what else do I need? Qin Feng asked in his heart. Chapter 592. An unforeseen event. Apart from mental energy materials, you don't seem to have any other necessities. After a pause, the demonic eye said, Just follow your heart. Let yourself obtain the greatest benefit. Even if you don't need them now, you might need them in the future. So, the more the better. The more the better? Qin Feng nodded inwardly. Soon after, a brilliant smile appeared on his face as he sincerely said, Actually, I'm not that unkind. If you have any other heavenly treasures, take them all out for me to see. I'll just pick a few that I'm satisfied with. Chiao Yun looked at him strangely. You're not mean? You're as shameless as that scoundrel with the surname Jing. Didn't you say you didn't care for the 9 heavens spiritual liquid? You didn't hesitate at all when you took these 3 drops. Chiao Yun couldn't be bothered to bicker with him, nor did she want to waste any more words with him. She took out many treasures from her storage ring. Qin Feng's eyes lit up, as expected of someone from a great academy. Even a student's collection was almost as good as his. He focused on a few high-quality medicinal ingredients and pills that he didn't have. At the same time, he also paid attention to Chiao Yun's expression. When a hint of anger appeared on her face, Qin Feng decisively stopped. I'll give you the money and the goods. I won't lie to you. After collecting everything, Qin Feng took out the fire core and handed it to Chiao Yun. Feeling the scorching heat from the fire core, the latter's beautiful eyes surged with unconcealable excitement. Thank you. Chiao Yun received the fire core. Then, under Qin Feng's depressed gaze, she impatiently sucked it into her body and fused it with the flames in her body. Qin Feng was secretly delighted. Exchanging something that he didn't need for so much, this trip was too worth it. Once the fire core entered her body, Chiao Yun's body suddenly shook. A formless wind spread from her body as the flames wantonly. Can you protect me? Qin Feng narrowed his eyes with a smile on his face. He didn't say anything. Chiao Yun glanced at him tiredly and took out a 6th-grade medicinal pill. Don't worry. During this time, no one will disturb you. No wonder Qin Feng was so calculative towards a girl. In his opinion, because of Jing Wui, he couldn't get along well with these students. Since that was the case, why not strive for greater benefits for himself? He wasn't the kind of idiot who would be bewitched by a beauty's smile. He wasn't the kind of idiot who couldn't tell north from south and only thought with his lower body. He still had to fight for himself. After receiving the other party's affirmation, Chiao Yun sat down cross-legged, stabilized her mind, and began to refine the fire core. Wisps of deep purple flames surrounded her. Looking at the deep purple flames that shrouded Chiao Yun's body, a tinge of astonishment flitted across Qin Feng's eyes. It seems that merging the 3 types of flames from the fire core was extremely beneficial to Chiao Yun. The power of these flames was clearly stronger than the pink flames from before. However, Qin Feng was only astonished. Whether it was the pink flames from before or the deep purple flames now, they were nothing in front of the ancient desolate spirit flame. If she merges with the fire core, your ancient desolate spirit flame will no longer be able to suppress her. The demonic eye's voice suddenly sounded out. Qin Feng was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he gave an indifferent smile. The ancient desolate spirit flame was indeed extremely effective against fire attribute cultivators. However, he didn't pay too much attention to it. The suppression brought about by a high-grade flame was merely an external object and far less important than one's own strength. Even without the suppression of the ancient desolate spirit flame on Chiao Yun, it wouldn't be so easy for Chiao Yun to devour him. Approximately half an hour later, the raging flames around Chiao Yun's body gradually died down. When the last wisp of flame entered her body, the latter's body was still for a moment before it suddenly shook. A fiery heat wave violently spread out in all directions with her at the center. Qin Feng's face did not have any change as he sensed the searing heat of the air wave. A white-colored light curtain appeared out of nowhere and blocked in front of him. When the incoming heat wave came into contact with the white-colored light curtain, it was split into 2 like a knife cutting through tofu. It was unable to harm him at all. Chiao Yun slowly opened her beautiful eyes. Within her eyes, a wisp of faint purple flame flickered. A moment later, it disappeared. She slowly stood up, a strange expression on her face as she stared at Qin Feng. It seemed to be unfriendly, provocative, and interested. You want to fight with me? Qin Feng smiled as the black and white spiritual energy slowly flowed within his body. A wisp of flame rose. Qiu Yun combed her long black hair as a purple flame danced between her slender and fair fingers. She smiled and said, "I'm not going to fight with you. I'm just interested in your white flames." As her laughter faded, she flicked her finger. A wisp of flame shot towards Qin Feng. Seeing this, Qin Feng faintly shook his head. When the purple flame was less than a meter away from him, he stretched out his hand and directly caught it in his palm. Wisps of white spiritual energy wrapped around it as he slowly clenched his fist. The demonic eye was right. The purple flame had fused with the fire heart, and its power had greatly increased. If it was before, the ancient desolate spirit flame could suppress and shatter it in an instant. But now, it took 3 times the time to shatter it into nothingness. Of course, this was only a competition of flames, and it had nothing to do with spiritual energy. Otherwise, Qin Feng would not be in his strongest state. He would be instantly turned into ashes. However, for Qiu Yun, this was enough to make her expression solemn. She became more and more curious about Qin Feng's flames. After all, a flame with the fire heart was no longer an ordinary flame. But even so, in front of Qin Feng's mysterious white flame, it still did not have the slightest effect. After all, the fire heart was fused with an external force. It was not born on its own, so there are still some flaws. Otherwise, the time might be doubled. The demonic eye said faintly. "Just what kind of flame is this flame of yours?" Qiu Yun walked over and asked with a curious expression. "Since we both got what we wanted, let's leave. If you have other plans, do as you please." Qin Feng did not say anything more about the ancient desolate spirit flame. He smiled and walked out of the hall without looking back. Qiu Yun was not annoyed by his attitude. After all, no one wanted to expose their trump card. "With this mysterious flame that can restrain me, if you want to leave, I might not be able to stop you," Qiu Yun said as she walked side by side with Qin Feng. Qin Feng looked at her and smiled, but did not answer. Since she thought that he relied on the ancient desolate spirit flame to have his confidence, then let her be. He did not want to explain more. "You're so lucky to get this flame. I'm afraid that your mysterious white flame has already given birth to the fire heart. No wonder my flame has no effect in front of you," Qiu Yun whispered. Qin Feng stopped and looked at Qiu Yun in surprise. He did not expect that Qiu Yun, who was usually cold and did not speak much, would be so talkative now. Qiu Yun also realized that she had lost her composure. She quickly adjusted her emotions and returned to her usual cold and indifferent self. She glanced at Qin Feng with some dissatisfaction, then turned and walked away, leaving Qin Feng with a beautiful and cold back view. Qin Feng stared blankly at the woman who changed her expression faster than flipping a book. He could not help but rub his nose with a bitter smile. This woman has a problem with her brain. The two of them walked out of the hall together. However, before they could leave, the entire hall shook violently, as if it was about to collapse. "What's going on?" The two of them changed their expressions at the same time. Rumble. A rumbling sound that was like muffled thunder suddenly resounded. Subsequently, Qin Feng and Qiu Yun's expressions instantly became unsightly. At the entrance of the cave not far from them, an incomparably huge black boulder suddenly fell from above and sealed the entrance. With their eyesight, they could see that this black boulder was not ordinary. They could not break it at all. Moreover, the person who set up this trap wanted to trap others. With their strength, it was obviously difficult to break this black boulder. "Be careful." The two of them gradually became dignified. The spiritual power in their bodies flowed quickly in their meridians, ready to face any unexpected situation. Dong. Suddenly, a soft sound was heard. It was particularly prominent in this quiet hall. Qin Feng and Qiu Yun's faces revealed a touch of shock. The two of them looked at each other and saw the unnaturalness in each other's eyes. Chapter 593. Evil Spirit Body. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from behind the bronze door. It was especially ear-piercing in this dark and silent hall. "There's someone here?" Chiao-yun made an unnatural sound. She subconsciously took a step back. "Be careful." Qin Feng took a deep breath. Compared to Chiao-yun, he was much calmer. In his qi, the Tao seed slowly rotated, Zhou Tianxing's death scripture slowly circulated, the great desolate war body could be activated at any time. The immortal Tensei I was also in preparation. Dong dong. As the two held their breaths, the sound came again. This time, it was clearer and closer to their previous guess. Dong dong dong. The sound kept coming. It was old-fashioned and stiff, but they were sure that it was the sound of footsteps. Dong dong dong. Under their gazes, the sound of footsteps behind the bronze door was getting closer and closer. Creak. A dull and unpleasant sound slowly came out. The bronze door slowly moved, and a white bone arm slowly stretched out. A moment later, a white skeleton without any flesh appeared in front of the two. Qin Feng's pupils shrank as he stared at the white skeleton. The skeleton was snow-white, and there was a faint black qi flowing around the ribs where the heart was. And in those deep eye sockets there was a crimson black flowing about. They were like two eyeballs, emitting an indescribable coldness, treacherousness and demonic evilness, causing Qin Feng's heart to tremble and tighten. This is a true evil spirit body. Be careful. This is a person who was once corroded by an evil spirit. Now that he has become an evil spirit body, his strength shouldn't be weak. It's not comparable to the ones that the girl met before. The demonic eye's voice sounded in Qin Feng's mind with a hint of heaviness. Qin Feng stared at the white skeleton. After a while, he asked, "What was his strength when he was alive?" "It's not weak. In fact, it's pretty good. I don't know why it's able to deceive the heavens and avoid being killed by the world. However, because too much time has passed, most of its power has been eroded by time. However, I estimate that the strength of this skeleton is at least at the level of the third heaven realm. It might even be stronger. It's very difficult to speculate if it involves an evil spirit," said the demon eye. "Moreover, the power of evil spirits cannot be judged by common sense. When fighting with them, you must be careful of being corroded by them. You should understand your own situation. In this world, you are the easiest to be corroded by evil spirit." Hearing this, Qin Feng's expression suddenly changed, becoming slightly unsightly. 3 heavens realm and an evil spirit body, such an expert was still too strong for him. If he was still stronger than this, then he would not have any power to contend with him. Even with Chiao-yun, it would be very difficult. However, you have an advantage that others do not have, and that is the spiritual fire. The spiritual fire is the nemesis of evil spirit. In battle, use the ancient desolate spirit flame to protect your heart and veins. You must also isolate the evil spirit seed in your body from the outside world to prevent the two from resonating and summoning each other. Qin Feng nodded slightly. The ancient desolate spirit flame seeped out of his pores and enveloped his entire body. "It's this kind of thing again." Chiao-yun's expression was extremely solemn. She stared at the white skeleton and said in a low voice, "But why do I feel that this guy is even more terrifying than the ones we met outside? No matter how powerful it is, we still have to find a way to defeat it. If you want to wear the crown, you have to bear its weight. We took the things here. Clearly, the previous owner of this place did not want others to take it for free." Qin Feng said in a deep voice. He could only say so and not tell the truth. Chiao-yun nodded and quickly calmed down. Purple spiritual fire burst out and coiled around her body, releasing a terrifying temperature. "Let's go." Qin Feng took the lead and rushed out. He directly activated his strongest state. A layer of chaotic light condensed on the surface of the white skeleton. The ancient desolate spirit flame pulsated with ancient desolate spirit flame and turned into a huge fist, greeting the white skeleton. However, Qin Feng's attack was enough to make a two-heaven realm expert not to underestimate it. Under the white skeleton's bony palm, it was as fragile as paper. The white skeleton waved its palm and scattered the spiritual fire fist. However, it was extremely fast and instantly closed in on Qin Feng. Spiritual fire palm. A shout suddenly rang out. A huge purple palm suddenly slapped horizontally and sent the white skeleton flying. The white skeleton rolled on the ground twice and stood up. The black aura on its ribs became a little darker. It abandoned Qin Feng and directly shot towards Qiu Yun. Obviously, it instinctively sensed that the one who could bring danger to it was this woman. Qiu Yun's expression was cold. The purple spiritual energy around her burned like flames. The moist air in the palace emitted bursts of sizzling sounds. She waved her hand and the spiritual energy burst out, enveloping the white skeleton. However, she still underestimated the white skeleton's strength. Every time the white skeleton waved, it would disperse a large amount of purple spiritual energy. Moreover, the burning from the flames did not affect the white skeleton at all. Bang! When the last piece of spiritual energy was dispersed, the white skeleton quickly moved and appeared in front of Qiu Yun. Then, it slapped its bony palm again. It heavily hit the purple shield that the latter had condensed with all her strength. Crack! Almost in an instant, cracks appeared on the purple shield, and then it shattered with a loud bang. When Qiu Yun saw this, thick disbelief surged within her eyes. The strength of this white skeleton had far exceeded her imagination. However, she did not have the time to care so much at this moment. She quickly withdrew and retreated. However, even though her speed was very fast, she was still swept by the palm wind that overflowed and she staggered backwards. The white skeleton quickly followed. Boom! 3 elements mutual generation hand. The tricolored hand quickly attacked and slammed into the white skeleton, causing the latter's body to move slightly. The terrifying palm also deviated from its original trajectory and slapped past Qiu Yun's shoulder. A fiery pain was transmitted from her shoulder, causing Qiu Yun to rapidly retreat. Her expression was ugly as she stared at the white skeleton. The latter's strength was too terrifying. With her current strength, if she used her full strength, she would not end up in such a miserable state even if she faced an ordinary Four Heavens stage expert. According to her estimation, the white skeleton's strength was probably comparable to the late stage of the Four Heavens realm, or even stronger. "Old man, what should we do?" Qin Feng anxiously called out to the demon eye. The white skeleton's strength was far beyond his expectations. His full-strength attack could not cause any hindrance to it. The difference between the two was too great. Even if Qiu Yun joined forces, it was simply not enough. Try to get close to it. As long as the distance is close enough, I can absorb the black qi in its heart. Without this thing to activate the demonic energy, it will not be a threat, the demon eye said in a deep voice. Chapter 594. Against the enemy. Bang, bang, bang. In the huge palace, muffled sounds of collisions could be heard from time to time. Ferocious spiritual energy waves, along with blazing heat, shot out in all directions. Amidst the wanton spiritual energy waves, a beautiful figure was constantly retreating. Bang! Another sound rang out. Qiu Yun's body was sent flying. The purple spiritual energy around her body was dispersed by the shockwave. Her face was also a little pale. Clearly, this kind of battle had consumed a lot of her energy. Qi. 2 spiritual energy, one white and one black, shot out and wrapped around the white skeleton like pythons. The white spiritual energy burned with a scorching heat that caused the void to distort, while the black spiritual energy flashed with a cold aura that seemed to freeze the air. Under the effects of the extreme cold and heat, the white skeleton started to emit a sizzling sound. Whoosh! Qin Feng quickly approached the white skeleton. Just as he was about to use his right hand to touch the white skeleton, His face suddenly changed and he retreated. Boom! The moment he retreated, the white skeleton's body shook violently. The black and white spiritual energy that wrapped around it were instantly dispersed. The skeleton swung its arm and swept past Qin Feng's face. The sharp wind caused a stinging pain in his face. The white skeleton's speed was too fast. Even if Qin Feng's reaction was fast enough, he still almost fell. The skeleton swung its arm and the white skeleton suddenly moved. In an instant it appeared in front of Qin Feng. The skeleton's palm was aimed at the latter's chest and fiercely slapped it. The air in front of the skeleton's palm was constantly crushed. The void was distorted. Feeling the terrifying power contained in the skeleton's palm, Qin Feng's scalp went numb. He crazily activated the spiritual energy in his body. The black and white spiritual energy and physical strength burst out at the same time and blocked in front of his chest. He then retreated once again. Bang! However, the power that was enough to block the attack of a two heavens stage expert cracked inch by inch under the skeleton's palm. It was simply unable to block it. Boom! The bone palm penetrated through all the obstructions and smashed onto Qin Feng's chest. However, because the obstruction had exhausted a portion of the bone palm's strength, in addition to the fact that Qin Feng was in a retreating state, the bone palm strength that poured onto his body was only 20 to 30%. However, just this little bit of strength was enough to cause Qin Feng's body to be sent flying and his blood and qi to churn. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The gap between him and the white skeleton. Even Qiu Yun, who was a three heavens stage expert, was defeated in front of the skeletons to time. 2. Furthermore, the burning of the ancient desolate spiritual flame and the erosion of the underworld pill's cold yin energy had no effect on the white skeleton. After knocking back Qin Feng with one blow, the white skeleton did not chase after him. Instead, it continued to attack Qiu Yun. Obviously, it did not put Qin Feng in its eyes. Its target was Qiu Yun. Seeing the white skeleton attack again, Qiu Yun felt bitter in her heart. This fellow's strength was too terrifying. Even if she gave it her all, she could only prevent herself from being seriously injured for a limited period of time. She simply did not have the power to resist. According to her estimation, the strength of the white skeleton was probably about to exceed the limit of a four heavens stage expert. Of course, it was only in terms of strength and did not have any spiritual energy fluctuations. Otherwise, they would have been seriously injured without any room to fight back. This fellow is too abnormal. What should we do? Qin Feng took a deep breath. The terror of the white skeleton was far beyond his imagination. Not to mention getting close, even blocking one or two attacks would be difficult. No matter how powerful it is, it's just a battle puppet without consciousness. You don't need to get close for a long time. You can get close in an instant or control me to come into contact with it for a short time. As long as you're at a certain distance, I can absorb the black gas on the skeleton. If one time doesn't work, try twice. If 2 times don't work, try thrice. I'll slowly absorb it, the demon I said in a deep voice. I didn't even get close just now, but I was almost seriously injured. This fellow's speed is faster than mine. How can I get close? Qin Feng said helplessly. That's your problem. I've told you the method. What you do is up to you. However, I have to remind you that it's not good for you to drag this out. This fellow doesn't feel any fatigue or pain. The corner of Qin Feng's mouth twitched. How were they going to fight? However, he also knew that he could not afford to delay any longer. He was too lazy to ask the demon eye because Qiu Yun was already retreating. She would probably be injured in another 2 or 3 breaths. Just as he was about to rush forward, the demon eye said angrily, "What an idiot! This evil spirit has no consciousness. Naturally, it can't sense mental strength. You can hide me and get close to it." Hearing this, Qin Feng was stunned. He immediately slapped his forehead. How could he have neglected mental strength? Although his mental power was weak, it was fatal to an opponent who could not sense his existence. After resolving Qiu Yun's crisis with 2 heavy punches, Qin Feng shouted at her, "Qiu Yun, I have a way to deal with it. However, I need to get close to it. Block it for me. Don't let it hit me." "You have a way?" Qiu Yun was panting. She was puzzled. "It doesn't matter if I have a way or not. I can only try." Qin Feng shouted and rushed toward the white skeleton. Although the white skeleton did not have any spiritual power or demonic power, every time it attacked, it could cause the air to explode and the void to ripple. His mental strength could not withstand it at all. He could only wrap the demon eye in his mental strength within a certain range and get close to it instantly. "Cooperate with me!" Body-changing steps. With a shout, Qin Feng suddenly disappeared and reappeared less than 3 meters to the left of the white skeleton. He stretched out his right hand, and his spiritual power broke through the turbulent void. His mental strength wrapped around the demon eye and he quickly approached the white skeleton's heart. Whoosh! As the demon eye approached, a dark air that was invisible to the naked eye was sucked into the demon eye from the white skeleton. However, as soon as it sucked in a wisp, a terrifying wind rushed toward it. A bone palm grew bigger and bigger in Qin Feng's eyes. Whoosh! Purple flames swept over and blocked in front of Qin Feng. Bang! The bone palm passed through and slapped toward Qin Feng. Buzz! Black and white spiritual power intertwined and blocked in front of his chest. Bang! The bone palm swept past and the spiritual power dissipated. Buzz! The chaotic light condensed into a shield and placed horizontally in front of his chest. Dong! The primal chaos shield was in a deadlock for a moment under the bone palm before it was shattered. After 3 waves of attacks, the bone palm finally smashed towards Qin Feng's chest without any obstruction. At this moment, Qin Feng had successfully absorbed the second wisp of black air. He clenched his fist and met the bone palm head-on. Clang! A crisp sound was heard. The white skeleton did not move at all, and Qin Feng was directly thrown back. His fist was red and his entire arm was numb. Qin Feng's heart couldn't help but tremble. This was still the bone palm after breaking through 3 layers of defense. It had almost crippled his arm. If any of the layers were missing, his arm would probably be crippled today. Chapter 595. Darkness blocks the path. Just as Qin Feng was thinking, a terrifying gust of wind suddenly assaulted him. The white skeleton actually gave up on attacking Qiu Yun, who was stronger, and turned to attack Qin Feng. Be careful, this fellow instinctively feels that you can weaken its strength. Its current target is you. The demonic eye's voice suddenly rang out, causing Qin Feng's skin to turn cold. Body-changing steps. In an instant, Qin Feng used the body-changing steps and teleported a few meters away, avoiding the white skeleton's fatal attack. As he retreated, Qin Feng shouted at Qiu Yun, "Tie it down. My method is feasible." At this moment, there was no need for his reminder. Qiu Yun's attack had already arrived. Purple flames wrapped around the white skeleton, buying time for Qin Feng to recover. When the white skeleton broke free from the purple flames, Qin Feng had already escaped to a place far away. If we continue to cooperate like this fellow's strength will be weakened, Qin Feng said to Qiu Yun. After a short period of recovery, he once again shot towards the white skeleton. Spiritual light flashed in his palm as his mental energy wrapped around the demonic eye once again and shot out. However, in this short period of time, Qin Feng absorbed 2 strands of black air from the skeleton's body and successfully retreated with the help of 3 layers of defense. The two's cooperation became more and more tacit as they practiced. In the end, Qin Feng didn't even need to fight against the white skeleton and was able to withdraw. In the hall, the white skeleton's attacks seemed fierce. Qin Feng and Qiu Yun were also in an abnormally difficult situation. However, the two of them didn't suffer any heavy injuries from beginning to end. Moreover, as the two of them successfully cooperated again and again, the strength of the white skeleton's attacks also decreased. Sometimes, after Qin Feng absorbed 2 strands of black air, with Qiu Yun's help, he was able to directly resist the white skeleton's attacks. Bang! Once again, Qin Feng's fist heavily collided with the bone palm. However, this time, Qin Feng's body merely trembled before stabilizing. "You can't do it now," Qin Feng sneered. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. His right hand directly slapped the white skeleton's heart. The demonic eye squirmed slightly, and the suction force suddenly increased. Streams of black air were sucked into the demonic eye. Instinctively sensing the rapid loss of its strength, the white skeleton fiercely resisted. However, when the purple flames swept over, its resistance was blocked. Moreover, as time passed, the resistance was rapidly weakening. When the last wisp of black air was sucked away, the spirit force in Qin Feng's palm suddenly erupted. The ferocious shockwave directly blasted the white skeleton away. The bones were shattered and scattered everywhere. Under the joint efforts of Qin Feng and Qiu Yun, the white skeleton was defeated. In his palm, the spiritual energy slowly dissipated and the demonic eye flickered for a moment before disappearing. Qin Feng gently exhaled and his tensed body instantly relaxed. Their battle didn't seem to be intense, but the consumption of physical strength and mental energy was more terrifying than an ordinary battle. Especially in the early stages of cooperation, if there was a slight carelessness, Qin Feng would have been seriously injured or even killed. Being in such a state of high tension consumed too much of his energy. Therefore, when it was over, Qin Feng's entire body and mind were filled with weakness. Fortunately, the main attacker was Qiu Yun. He didn't open the second gate. Therefore, his body, which could completely withstand the backlash of the Gate of Life, didn't suffer much damage. It was just excessive exhaustion. Qiu Yun walked over and looked at the scattered skeletons with lingering fear. Then, she looked at Qin Feng, and the complexity in her eyes became more intense. At this point, how could she not guess that the continuous weakening of the white skeleton was due to Qin Feng's means? However, she didn't ask. She just looked at Qin Feng deeply and sat down cross-legged to recover her exhausted strength. After a long while, she recovered first and looked at the bronze stone door. After a while, Qin Feng also recovered. He looked at Qiu Yun and asked with a smile, "Do you want to see what's behind the stone door?" Qiu Yun raised her eyebrows. After thinking for a while, she nodded. Now that the retreat was sealed, it seemed that this was the only way to go. The two looked at each other. After adjusting their condition to the peak, they didn't hesitate and walked through the bronze stone door. The bronze stone door was extremely ancient. They didn't know which era it belonged to. There were many extremely complicated patterns and totems carved on it. There were also many beast shapes, but the two couldn't understand what kind of spirit beasts they were. The two looked at each other and then went through the gap of the door. Behind the bronze door was a vast and boundless world. The two stared at it with wide eyes. If they didn't experience it for themselves, it was really hard to imagine that such a vast and boundless place would appear in this underground, dead end. This place didn't look any different from the outside world. The earth, mountains, rivers, tall trees, short grass, everything that could be seen in the outside world was here. However, this place was slightly darker than the normal world. It was like the sunset, emitting an inexplicable feeling of vicissitudes. "We should have returned to the surface," Qin Feng said. The two walked in this world, and their faces were quite solemn. The white skeleton entered the palace from here. It was difficult to guarantee that there weren't other white skeletons of the same strength. However, their worries were superfluous. It was quiet here. Other than the slight sound of the two walking, there was no other unusual movement. "This place seems a little abnormal," Chiao Yun said softly, and her face became more and more solemn. Qin Feng nodded. He naturally also noticed that this place was too strange. It was obviously exactly the same as the normal world, but there was always a sense of strangeness. It was as if such a place didn't conform to the natural ecology and shouldn't exist. The two quickly went away on their respective heaven tools. After passing through many mountains, a huge natural moat blocked their way. It was like a huge black screen. The top was connected to the sky, and the bottom was rooted in the ground. The sound of flowing water could be heard. The black screen was connected to the sky and the earth, and it was extremely spectacular and magnificent. However, at the same time, there was also an extremely frightening chill that spread out. Even from far away, one could feel the chill on their skin, and they needed to use their spiritual energy to resist it before they could get close. Qin Feng's face was quite strange at this time because he sensed that the cold air here was quite similar to the underworld elixir in his body. What is this? After getting closer, the feeling became stronger. Qin Feng couldn't help but ask the demonic eye in his heart. I'm not sure, but it's somewhat similar to the underworld elixir in your body, the demonic eye sensed for a moment and said in a deep voice. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.